This is Audible.
Blackstone presents Earth Spells Are Easy, Grimoires of a Middle-Aged Witch, Book 1, by Renee George. This book is read by Autumn Brandt. Chapter 1. The garlicky scent of takeout created a nauseating stench I found hard to ignore. Now I would forever associate Mongolian beef with divorce, and it made me want to yark. I passed the legal documents across the kitchen table to my lawyer, Donald Overton III, then glanced around my kitchen. Sorry about the mess, Don. There were 2 plates, silverware, and cups in the sink, and it had been the 3rd time I'd said I was sorry since his arrival. The place is cleaner than my house, he said. Don, who was a 6'4" man with rounded shoulders and a big balding head to match, wasn't just my lawyer. He was also my brother-in-law, which meant I knew he was stretching the truth to spare my feelings. My sister Rose was a meticulous housekeeper. Is that it? I asked. He gave me a sympathetic look, emphasis on the pathetic, and nodded. That's it, Iris. Done is done. I rubbed my face. Done is done, I repeated. I'm officially Iris Everly. I'd legally changed it a few weeks earlier. Still, it hadn't felt definitive that I was no longer a Callahan until I'd signed the divorce papers. I'd wasted 18 years married to a man who left me for someone else, someone younger, someone male. My ex, it turned out, was bisexual. I've always been open-minded. I genuinely believe love is love and that people should live their truths. But when it's your husband, it's a lot harder to be congratulatory about someone discovering their authentic self. Thanks for bringing those to me. I stood up from the table. I have to get Michael up for practice. Michael was my 17-year-old son. I worried he'd suffered the most during the divorce. But my son had always been a quiet child, not distant or antisocial, just even keel and low drama. It made it extremely difficult to gauge his real feelings most of the time. Is he still playing football? Dawn asked. Yep, today's the first day of spring training. Dawn added, You look like you need a friend. You should call Rose. Unable to shake the feeling of trepidation, I said, I'm fine. I'll be okay. Dawn gave me a grim smile, then gathered up the paperwork and slipped it into a folder. I'll get these filed at the courthouse today. You and Michael should come to dinner tomorrow night. I stood up and walked him out of the kitchen and through the living room to the front door. I'll call Rose later, I promise, I told him, which had been the only promise Dawn had been trying to extract. Of course, I hadn't promised when I would call. Please do. You know how Rose gets. My brother-in-law gave me a gentle shoulder squeeze, then left. I had 3 sisters and 1 brother. Rose, the youngest of us all, had taken on the responsibility as the family worrywart since our mother died of pancreatic cancer 5 years earlier. The doctors had given her 3 or 4 months to live, but she died 3 weeks later in her sleep because the cancer had strangled her aorta and caused an aneurysm. I closed the door and made my way down the dark hallway past the kitchen. Even with the door closed, the foul sense of boy stink threatened to knock me off my feet. Garlic leftovers had nothing on eau de sun. I tapped on the door. No response. I pounded my fist against the wood. Still no response. I opened the door a crack. Hello? I leaned on the door to open it wider as the sickly sweet and sour odors hit me full force, burning the back of my nostrils. My eyesight adjusted to the dark. I saw a small mountain of dirty clothes wedged behind the door, barring further entry. I could see long toes peeking over the edge of a queen-sized mattress. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known a human being occupied the bed. Michael, damn it. Lately, damn it had been his middle name. Let me in. What do you want? Came his muffled voice full of sleepy annoyance. I want you to open this stupid door right now. Go away. I'll go away. I'll go away to the garage and get a screwdriver and a hammer and take this freaking door off its hinges. Screw this. I pushed the door as hard as I could. Mount dirt and grime slid across the carpet and allowed me entry. His foot drifted out of sight. He was moving. Another good sign. What the hell died in your room? It smells like a serial killer's drop zone. The boy sat up, his short hair looking too perfect to be slept in, just like his father. He scratched his patchy goatee. Dramatic much? His voice, low and pleasant in tone, held an edge of sarcasm. I fought back a smile. My kid was beautiful, no doubt about it. He was one of the few things Evan and I had done right. He blinked his soft brown eyes in my direction. I'm not going to practice. Oh, you're going. I picked up a pair of sweatpants, a green pair at the top of the pile, and chucked them at him. Get dressed. He groaned and threw himself onto the bed, pulling the covers over his shoulders. I'm tired. You wouldn't be so tired if you weren't up all night playing video games with your buddies. He grunted. Translation? Whatever. Michael Evan Callahan, you will get yourself out of bed this minute. You promised your father. He moaned his dissent. Coach is going to be there, he replied. If you want a relationship with your dad, you're going to have to come to terms with the fact that Coach Adam is a part of his life now. I sounded so reasonable, even to my own ears. Inside, I was screaming. It had been a year since Evan and I had separated, and most of the time, I tried to not hate him for what he'd done to our family. But sometimes I struggled with taking the higher road. Yeah, well, you didn't catch them going at it. He was sitting up now, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. And you expect me to come to terms with it? Unfortunately, my son had discovered his father's infidelity before me. He'd gone to talk to Coach Adam after school hours and found him and Evan kissing in the coach's office. Michael had come home and locked himself in his bedroom that night. I could still see his hurt and rage. Being caught by our kid was what prompted Evan to finally come clean with me. Sighing, I sat on the bed next to Michael and put my hand on his shoulder. Kissing is not going at it, I said. My oldest sister Dahlia was a family counselor. She'd recommended someone for the family to see, including Evan, in order for us to move forward with our lives. Close enough, he countered. It took months for Michael to even look at his father, then a few months more for him to have a civil conversation with him. I was angry with Evan, but still, I was glad that Michael was finally seeing him again. They'd been taking it slowly, a few lunches and dinners here and there. 1 month ago, their relationship had taken another setback when Evan and Adam decided to go public and move in together. I missed the days when I could scoop Michael into my arms and cuddle him. He was at that age now where he would have pulled away if I tried to comfort him. As it was, I could feel him shrink at my consoling touch. How could I expect him to understand and accept his father's new life when I could hardly think about him without my own rage clouding my mind? I felt like I'd wasted my best years on him. He'd promised to love me until death do we part. Yes, I lost my husband, but I'd also lost my best friend. Evan and I had more in common than anyone I'd ever met. We had the same tastes in books, music, and movies. We'd shared similar political and philosophical beliefs, and we'd rarely run out of conversation. On top of that, our sex life had been good. Don't get me wrong, we'd had our share of arguments. It's hard to be with someone for 18 years and not have any fights, but we'd always made up. In other words, his falling in love with someone else, regardless of gender, had been a complete blindside. Michael, I said, my voice gentle but strained, I understand that you're uncomfortable around your dad and Adam, but avoiding them is not going to make your life any better or easier. Do you want a relationship with your father? The teenager raised a wary brow. Don't shrink me, Mom. That's what you pay Dr. Bradford for. I narrowed my gaze. Well, do you? Do you want a relationship with your father? And keep in mind, he's the only father you have. I wasn't above deploying mommy guilt. Your dad changed your diapers, coached your baseball and basketball teams. He attended every sporting event you ever played in high school. And he loves you," I said with as much gentleness as I could manage. "Now tell me, do you want a relationship with your father? Yes or no?" "Sure," he said more than a little grudgingly, "but not with Coach." "I'm not trying to make you have a relationship with Adam, but he and your father are a package right now." The words, even from my own lips, were a punch in the gut. Evan was a package with someone else now. And like Michael, I had to find a way to come to terms with it. My teenaged son grunted. Unsympathetically, I clapped my hands to get his attention. "Get up." "I hate you," he said through gritted teeth as he clambered from the bed. I tried not to let the hurt show on my face. There were plenty of times I'd thought the same words to my mother when I was a teenager, but I never meant it, and I reminded myself as I let out a slow breath that Michael didn't mean it either. "You can hate me all you want, son, just as long as you mind me." After dressing, and before he left the house, Michael gave me a rare hug and mumbled, "Love you," in my ear. "I know," I said. "Love you more." And out the door he went. Once I was alone, my breath started coming faster, harder, and my pulse kicked up a notch. A feeling I knew all too well. This was the beginning of a panic attack. I tried to slow my exhales through pursed lips. "Blow out the candle," I told myself, as I raced for the back door. I quickly shoved it open and staggered into my floral paradise, aka my backyard garden. It was a brilliant mixture of colorful wildflowers and herbs. Cleome and zinnias to attract butterflies and hummingbirds, my mother had said when she'd helped me plan the garden. There were yarrow plants for ladybugs. And fennel and dill, which are supposed to attract beneficial insects, but frankly, after all these years, I couldn't remember which bugs were good. I'd turned the fountain on in the spring, and the sound of trickling water started to soothe my anxiety. I sat on a bench near a patch of garden phlox. The plants were all green now, but in July, delicate pale pink flowers would cluster in bunches. I put my elbows on my knees and lowered my head. Linda stared at me with contempt. I flipped her off. She didn't react. Of course, she wouldn't. Linda was a stone garden gnome. I'd turned her around the night before, so she was staring at the dill and not at the bench. But, I was guessing, Michael had moved her to mess with me. The kid loved freaking me out. It was his new favorite game of let's see how many ways we can startle Mom. Her beady eyes always creeped me out. More than once I'd contemplated tossing her out, but she'd been a gift from my mother. "Every garden needs a gnome," she'd told me, "and this sweet girl will keep your garden lush." Like a mini Santa, the gnome had a snow-white beard. Mom had painted its hat and tunic pink. "How do you know it's female?" I'd asked my mother. "Oh," she'd given me a knowing look. "She's full of feminine energy." My mother had tapped her chest. "I can feel it in here." I could have done without a gnome, but Mom loving the ugly statuette had softened my feelings toward the little creature. "What now?" I asked Linda. "What do I do with my life now?" I waited for a few seconds for a response I knew would never come. A rustle in the bushes drew my attention away from my stone nemesis. 2 long ears twitched above a small rosemary bush, followed by the rest of the rabbit. It was much larger than an eastern cottontail and smaller than a desert jackrabbit. I'd seen it several times since the beginning of spring, and I wondered what in my garden kept the little fella coming back. I stood up and narrowed my gaze at my recurrent garden guest. "Hello, Bunny Foo-Foo." The rabbit, reddish-brown in color, twitched its nose at me. The hair on my head and my arms raised as if the air had turned staticky around me. Only there was hardly any breeze this morning. The rabbit scurried back behind some bushes, and by the time I walked over, I saw a burrowed-out spot under my privacy fence. The electric tingle I'd felt had disappeared with the small bushy-tailed beast. I began to look up types of hairs on my phone when it rang, saving me from going down the proverbial and literal rabbit hole. I smiled as the name of the caller flashed on my screen. It was my second-to-oldest sister, Marigold. "Hey, sis," I answered. "What's up?" "What are you doing tomorrow night?" she asked. No, "How are you?" No, "Sorry about your divorce." I loved that about my hippy-dippy sister. She knew how to avoid a sore subject. I grinned. "I'm watching Hospital Blues. It's a new episode." She sighed. "That's what DVRs are for. You can record it. Is there anything you can't get out of?" I made a mental calculation of all the things I had to do this week, including anything involving work or Michael, and couldn't think of a darn thing. He was old enough now to drive himself to practices, and I'd finished editing Don't Let Your Participle Dangle, a follow-up textbook to Where Did I Misplace My Modifier? I used to be a professor of English out at Darling University, located just outside my hometown of Southill Village in the Ozark Mountains in northern Arkansas near the Missouri border. I quit when Michael was born and had been working from home, living the glamorous life of a textbook editor ever since. Unfortunately, I wouldn't have my next assignment until June 10th, so I didn't have a reason to say no to Marigold. "Is washing my hair a good excuse?" Her tone was bright. "Not even in the slightest. Dress casual," she said. "I'll pick you up at 4:30. "So early? What are we doing?" "There's an estate auction going on in New Weston. We are going to bid on something eccentric and fun." "We're going to do what?" I grabbed my coffee from the counter and sat down at my dining room table. "Going to an estate auction. Ruth Boothwell died 3 months ago without any heirs, and her estate is auctioning off loads of fancy stuff." "Fancy stuff, huh?" I asked skeptically. "Look, Mare, I don't have time to go to an estate auction." "Come on, Iris. What else have you got planned?" "Washing my hair, shaving my legs, waxing my mustache?" Marigold laughed. "It's about time. Self-care is the first step in reclaiming your life. But you can do that tonight. Besides, this is more than just a leisure trip. A colleague of mine, Professor Keir Quinn, has written a book and needs a good editor before he starts submitting it to publishers." Marigold taught women's studies at Darling U. She, like me, had gone the academia route. This wasn't the first time she'd asked me if I would look at a friend's manuscript. The last one she'd asked me to look at had been a romantic thriller set in South Florida. I'd given it a hard pass. I don't know how many times I have to tell you that I don't do fiction, but I don't do fiction. Of course, I read fiction for pleasure, but I didn't want to have to ponder if a comma should exist in a sentence or if it was a choice the writer made to leave it out. Same with sentence fragments and other style issues that might or might not be on purpose. I liked the grammatical and mechanical clarity in which textbooks were written. "I know you don't do fiction," Marigold shot back, "so it's a good thing Keir's writing is of the nonfiction variety. Mills and Leyden Academic Press sends me plenty of work to keep me busy." She sucked her teeth, producing a sound of sheer annoyance. "I know you only get 1 book a month, and I also happen to know that you are amazingly fast at your job. Besides, you could use extra money right now, right? And this guy is willing to pay double your normal fees." I sat down and closed my eyes as I prayed for patience, then asked, "Why would he do that?" "Because Keir needs it done fast. You know how it is at universities, publish or perish. Besides, it's an easy gig." My sister sounded exasperated with me. "You should take it." "It's only easy if he's a half-decent writer." "He is," Marigold assured me. "Look, come with me to the auction, talk to the man. And if you decide to turn down the job, no harm, no foul." The divorce, even with the sister-in-law lawyer discount, had been costly. I wondered if Rose had reached out to Marigold and the two of them had cooked up this scheme to help me financially. I did need the money. And aside from that, even if I decided not to take the gig, going to an estate auction might be fun. The idea of getting out and doing something that wasn't work, kid, or husband, I shook my head at my mental slip, ex-husband, related, stirred excitement in me. "Fine," I finally said. "What time should I pick you up tomorrow?" "I can drive," she protested. Barely, I told her. Do you want me to go or not? I heard her harumph. I'll come over to your house at 4, but you can drive, she said before I could protest. The auction starts at 5:30, but I want to get there early enough to check out the sale items. I'll be ready with bells on. Excellent, she said. And Iris? Yeah? You know, if you want to talk about today or whatever, I'm here for you. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I do know. Love you, sis. Love you back. Chapter 2. I'd changed my jeans 3 times. Nothing seemed to fit right anymore. According to the digital scale in the bathroom, I'd gained 10 pounds in the past 3 months. I hadn't noticed until my pants had become uncomfortably tight. Unfortunately, I couldn't hide the muffin top pants created with my stomach unless I wore loose, and in my eyes, unflattering shirts. Resolved to my fate, I'd put on a pair of yoga pants and a flowing top. I told you to dress casual, Marigold said as she got into the car. This is casual, I replied. I meant fancy auction casual, not binge-watching past seasons of the Great British Bake Off casual. I can go like this or I can stay home, I said as I pulled out of the driveway and headed out of the neighborhood. Fine. Her lower lip jutted in a pouty sulk. This will have to do. My sister, who was 5'8", 2 inches taller than me, and thin as a reed, unlike me, wore wide-leg jeans and a boho chic tunic top with a light blue and yellow floral print that flattered her black hair and tan skin. We looked nothing alike, but of course we wouldn't. I, like the rest of my siblings, had been adopted when I was young. One thing I learned at an early age was that blood didn't make you family. Love, support, and devotion created family. I had all 3 in spades with my siblings. Marigold took a bottle of perfume from her satchel purse and gave herself a spritz. I smiled as the floral notes of Chanel No. 5 filled the car. It had been Marigold's favorite since high school. She'd bought herself a bottle with babysitting money when she was 16. It had made her feel grown up and very French. Ooh la la. I took the highway exit. As we drove out of Southdale Village, Marigold grew unusually quiet. What is it? I asked. My sister frowned. You know you're an attractive woman, right? I snorted. What's your point? My friend, the guy with the book, he's seriously handsome, like super hot. And I just thought... I held up my hand. Stop right there. I have no interest in being set up. Okay. Marigold leaned forward and rubbed her knees. I won't set you up. I raised a brow at her. Did you already set me up? No, she denied. When I gave her a pithy glare, she shook her head. Honest, I didn't do any matchmaking beyond getting you in the same place as him, and he does have a book that he's interested in having you edit. What's this book about? Something about alchemy and symbols of the occult, I think. What does he teach? Defense against the dark arts? Harry Potter called and told you to shut up. She rolled her eyes at me and sucked her teeth. Professor Quinn teaches classes on occult religions. So it is defense against the dark arts. Marigold snickered. Dr. Reagan nearly swallowed his false teeth when the university hired Professor Quinn. Dr. Philip Reagan was the chair of the Religious Studies Department. It was in the same building as the English department when I'd been an instructor there 18 years ago. He was old then. Reagan has to be 100 years old. I can't believe he hasn't retired yet. He just turned 88, but the pious bastard keeps on ticking. I'm pretty sure he crosses himself daily when he passes Professor Quinn's office. I giggled. Does Reagan carry holy water and a wooden cross as well? I don't think that works on pagans, Marigold pointed out with a grin. Okay, so tell me why a professor of the paranormal is interested in an estate auction. Is the house haunted? Marigold smiled. Apparently, Old Lady Boothwell has a lot of weird stuff she's collected over the years, and the auction house hired him to authenticate some of the items. So she was into all the hoodoo hokum. Something like that, she said. And your friend is too? Well, he does teach Hokum 101, she snickered. Har har. Marigold had been teaching women's studies at the university for over 10 years, and I'd never heard her talk about this professor of the occult. Is that even a discipline? What, Hokum? I shook my head and smirked. Yes, Hokum. How does someone get a degree in the occult? I don't really know, Marigold said. But I'm sure there's a degree program out there somewhere. You can major in just about anything these days. She shrugged. This is Kier's first semester at Darling. The way she said his name denoted a fondness that went beyond friendship. Just how well do you know this professor? It's nothing like that, my sister assured me. Kier and I are strictly friends. No benefits. Give him a chance, okay? I know you're going to adore him. I'm sure I won't. The air conditioner blasted frigid air against my chest. I reached out and closed the vent, then put on my blinker and turned down Boothwell Manor Road, so named for the manor built at the end of the drive. Where did this professor of paranormal live before he moved to our neck of the woods? He spent a few years in Ireland for his doctorate, but I think he comes from one of the coasts. I laughed. That really narrows it down. So Quinn is either from California, New York, or Texas? You forgot Alaska, Marigold smirked. Probably not Texas. I think he's from the east somewhere, but I won't swear to it. There were multiple rows of cars and trucks lining the long driveway leading up to the main house. I had to stomp the brakes once to avoid hitting a woman who had just willy-nilly walked in front of my car. My sister reached over and laid on my horn for a moment, but the woman walking in front of us didn't even look up. Cripes, what is wrong with these people? Distracted with dreams of hitting it big on the Antiques Roadshow. My father loved both the British and the American versions of the show. He had many of them recorded to VCR cassettes and stacked like books in his living room bookshelves. Does Dad's VCR still work? Marigold frowned at me. I think so. Why? Just thinking about all those hours of recorded shows from PBS. Marigold laughed. Like Bob Ross and Hee Haw? I grinned and shook my head. Among others. I parked on a tuft of grass between two trees, thankful for a compact car. Otherwise, we'd have been walking a half-mile up to the palatial house. After, we headed up the road with everyone else. I can't believe how many people are here. I'd been to a few estate auctions in the past, but I'd never seen one quite so well attended. Probably because estates this lavish usually got hauled off to real auction houses. Everybody is curious about all the stuff old Lady Boothwell left behind, Marigold said. She was a bit of a recluse at the end, but rumor has it she was still collecting weird shit up until her last days. Who doesn't love weird shit? Right? Marigold said with excitement. This is going to be awesome. Her enthusiasm was contagious. I felt giddy as we took the steps up to the expansive and open front door. Of course, by the time we'd signed in and got our bidding numbers, we were shoulder to shoulder with the crowd, and the shine of this adventure had tarnished. Sardines weren't packed this tight. Is it too late to go home? I asked. I was still a bit of a raw nerve after signing divorce papers, and I was beginning to think that maybe this wasn't the distraction I needed. We could eat our weight in ice cream and binge-watch cozy mysteries on that British channel that you love. Marigold turned her gaze on me. Tempting, but no. We're here, so let's do it. The items for the auction were set out on the tables with tags, and the rumors about the late Mrs. Boothwell's eccentric taste had not been exaggerated. She had a Victorian palmistry sculpture, a wand made of purple heartwood, and some ceremonial masks from Africa, Japan, Mexico, and the Bahamas. A display shelf housed 20 fertility statuettes. Half were female depictions with large breasts and rounded bellies. The other half were of the male variety with giant phalluses pointing toward the crowd of eager buyers. One had a tall headdress that was skinnier than his erection. I leaned in for a closer look at the tag. Like it had in my garden the day before, the air around me felt like it held a slight electric charge. Cripes. It had to be the new fabric softener I was using. That's Min, a man next to me said, the Egyptian god of fertility. I smirked. More like the god of Viagra. His soft, low chuckle drew my attention. The man was tall, lean like a runner. His dark hair was slicked back and his gray eyes held a hint of amusement. He'd be a hard pill to swallow. My skin buzzed as he gave me an appraising once-over. The heat of a blush rose in my cheeks. I forced a bland expression and leveled my gaze at him. Old Lady Boothwell probably had no gag reflex. The man grinned, the slight lift in his brow the only sign that I'd surprised him. He leaned in and said with a quiet voice, "She has an assortment of fetish items that border on torture devices, so it wouldn't surprise me." I pursed my lips, my eyes widening in shock. "She did not." He laughed and shook his head. "No, she didn't. But wouldn't it have been grand if she had?" Marigold showed up and slipped her arm in mine. "Hey, I see you've met Kier already." She glanced at the man. "I told you he was gorgeous." Kier's eyes darted to the right as if looking for an escape route, but he didn't actually try to leave. Instead, he met my gaze. "You must be Iris," he said. "Your sister has told me all about you." I gave Marigold a soft elbow to the ribs and stifled a groan. "Well, that's 10 minutes of your life you'll never be able to get back." His mouth quirked up on one side. "I know a good time travel spell." "Isn't that handy?" I said, wishing it were true. "I would go back in time to the point where I conceived Michael, then I would have dumped Ethan's cheating ass." I shook my head. He hadn't been cheating on me then. Kier shifted his gaze to a suit-clad man across the room who was waving madly at him. He tilted his head to me, and I couldn't stop myself from admiring the sensuous curve of his lower lip. "I'll be talking to you soon," he said. "Yes, you will," I answered breathlessly. That's when Marigold's elbow found my ribs. I blinked. "I mean, yes, of course, to talk about the book." He grinned then and winked. "Is that what the kids are calling it these days?" Before I could stammer out a response, Kier Quinn strolled off in the direction of the urgently waving man. "He's really full of himself," I muttered. My sister laughed. "The lady doth protest too much, methinks." I reached into my purse and jingled my keys. "I'm going to leave you here to fend for yourself." She pressed her fingertips into her chest, her eyes wide in mock disbelief. "You wouldn't dare." "No, I wouldn't," I agreed. "Now distract me with cool stuff before I change my mind." Chapter 3. "Oh," Marigold cooed over a tall viridescent vase with a fluted opening. The piece, mounted inside a silver holder, was described as a Victorian epergne with a silver-plated stand. "You know how I love green. This would go perfectly on the shelf next to my chaise." "If you don't mind a little radiation in your reading nook," I told her. The bottom of the tag said it was made of Vaseline glass, a glass with trace amounts of uranium added. We'd made our way from the foyer into the grand dining hall. The room was bigger than my kitchen and dining room combined. Marigold waved a dismissive hand at me. "It's not like I would drink out of it." Someone tapped my shoulder. I turned around, but no one was close to me. There were several boxed lots on 3 buffet tables in the center of the room behind me. Boxed lots usually had a bunch of small things inside that would all be auctioned off as one item. Bidding on them was a lot like panning for gold. Sometimes it was all worthless rocks, but occasionally there would be a few nuggets to make it worth your while. A crowd of men and women milled around the lots, but no one even glanced in my direction. I focused my attention back on my sister and her radioactive find. Another tap. I turned again. Again, there was no one. "What's wrong?" Marigold asked. "Someone's messing with me." I glared at anyone and everyone in the vicinity, but no one lingered. A woman made eye contact with me, then quickly moved on to another room. I noted the hot professor standing under the archway leading into a huge formal dining room. He was engrossed in a serious conversation with the guy in the suit. "Messing with you how?" Marigold asked. Whoever it is keeps tapping me on the shoulder, then ducking away before I turn around. Marigold scanned the room with me, then shrugged. Maybe it's opportunity knocking, she said. She quirked a brow toward Kier. Maybe it's the universe trying to get your attention. Or maybe it's just some jackass who thinks he or she is a comedian. Even if it was the universe, the way it had been treating me lately, I had zero interest in listening to anything it had to say. I changed the subject. So, are you going to bid on the vase? Marigold touched the base of it and smiled. I think I will. It really speaks to me. I hear wearing a tinfoil hat can put a stop to the voices. I chuckled when she rolled her eyes. My prankster tapped my shoulder once more. I whirled around, ready to sock someone in the nose, but still no one was behind me. Son of a bitch! Who is this guy, Houdini? Marigold's brow dipped. Iris, I didn't see anyone behind you. Are you sure someone was touching you? The expression of concern on my sister's face soured my stomach. I know what a tap feels like. Tap, tap, tap. Instead of turning this time, I reached back to grab the hand, but my fingers only found my shoulder. Marigold gave a slight shake of her head as I met her gaze. I'm telling you, there wasn't anyone there. I blinked at her, rubbing my arms to stave off a sudden chill. I swear it felt real. You're probably just overly tired. She didn't bring up the divorce, but the implication was there. I haven't been getting much sleep, I admitted. Even so, those taps had felt solid and real. I glanced over at the boxes on the tables in the center of the room. There were fewer people around them now. I'm going to go check out the boxes, I told my sister. She gave me a quick nod. Go ahead. I want to look at the depression glass over here. She pointed to shelves of decorative plates, bowls, and candy dishes on the far wall. She looked at her watch. If you want, we can split up and meet in the ballroom when the auction starts. It's a plan. A feeling of disquiet grew inside me as I looked in the first box on the table nearest me. It had some cookbooks, metal serving spoons, and some kitchen gadgets. I went to the next box on the left, and this noise started in my head like an unpleasant hum. Marigold nailed it when she said I was overly tired. It was the only explanation for all the weirdness I'd been feeling. I rubbed my eyes and gave my head a slight shake. The noise grew louder. I went back to the previous box, and the humming lessened. I moved back to the second box, and the noise increased. Weird. I went back to the first box, volume down. Then back to the new box, volume up. I made a mental note to call a shrink for an appointment to get my sanity checked. My sister Dahlia would have said I was having psychosomatic symptoms due to emotional trauma, and she'd probably be right. The divorce had sucked, but I'd been ready for it to be over. Maybe signing the paperwork had stressed me out more than I thought it had. The box that hummed was full of bird figurines. Perhaps some of them were Hummels. I'd seen one on the Antiques Roadshow that had been appraised at $600. An unpleasant burning sensation started in my fingertips as I reached into the box, and it traveled through my palm and up my arm. I snatched my hand back. Psychosomatic or not, there was something in me that wanted nothing to do with the porcelain fowl. I moved to the next box on the table. I could still hear a humming sound, but it was more pleasant than the previous one, soothing and weirdly inviting. The box top was folded over. When I drew back the cardboard flap, the first thing that caught my attention was the scent of musty parchment. I smiled as I took in the beautiful sight before me. Old books. There was a hodgepodge mishmash of leather-bound tomes stacked inside. There were 5 books, each of them probably 11 by 16 inches or thereabouts in size. There was only enough room in the box to fit 4 of them stacked together across the bottom with their spines facing out. The 5th book had been set on top with the front cover exposed. I leaned over and inhaled. I do love the scent of antique books, a brunette woman next to me said. There is a romance to holding and reading from pages that have been inked by hand or an old-fashioned iron press. She looked at me as if she knew me, but I didn't recognize her. Do we know each other? She studied me for a moment, then smiled. I think we do. You're Mrs. Callahan, right? You were my instructor for freshman composition at Darling U. Oh my gosh, that would have been at least 17 years ago. 18, she said with a laugh. But who's counting? She held out her hand. Lou Ann Danvers, but call me Lou. All my friends do. I shook her hand. Please call me Iris. I haven't been a teacher in so long. And I was no longer Mrs. Callahan, but I wasn't going into that. Do you live in Southville now? I recently got a divorce, she said solemnly. I needed a change, and I had some fond memories of this town from my college days, so I moved here. Just like that, huh? I could see the appeal of running away from an old life. No kids then? Nope, just me, she smiled. Hey, if you ever get bored, I'd love to hang out. Sure, I said as she was pulling out her phone. She handed it to me. Just put your number in there. I'll text you later so you have mine. Sounds good. I put my name and number in her contacts and handed the phone back to her. These books are great, she said. You planning on bidding on them? Maybe. I brushed my fingertips across the cover of the top book. I wonder how old this one is. The embossed leather was soft to the touch without any of the cracking that can happen with age. Mrs. Boothwell had taken exceptionally good care of the book. Sewn in silver thread added a quilted quality to the borders, and there wasn't a single popped stitch. My heart raced with anticipation. Wow, this cover is mint. They're not worth much, Kier Quinn said louder than necessary, joining Lou and me at the table. But I could see the sentimental value in them for a collector. I gave him a sharp look. These are old and in great shape. They have more than sentimental value. He shrugged. I wouldn't give more than $20, maybe $30 for them. After his proclamation, several people who'd been waiting for me to leave the box moved on to other items. His low estimation of the value had focused their attention elsewhere. I arched a brow at him and he smiled. You're welcome. He pulled a card from his front pocket with his name and a phone number printed on the front. I hope you'll return the favor by texting me to set up a meeting to talk about my book. From what your sister says, you're the best nonfiction editor around, and I could desperately use your service. I'm the only nonfiction editor around here. I studied Kier for a moment. He had chiseled good looks that I was certain most people found charming and hard to resist. I was not most people. I bet there's not a desperate bone in your body. Not a single desperate bone, huh? He chuckled, and the sound was like Marvin Gaye's music on steroids. In other words, it was sexy as hell. I didn't mean... I shook my head. My cheeks flushed with heat as I shifted focus to the leather-bound tome. A symbol of an upside-down triangle with a horizontal line across the bottom half just above the point decorated the cover. Was that always there? I didn't recall seeing it when I first looked at the book, but I'd been understandably a little scatterbrained today. Do you know what this is? I do, he replied. I waited for him to elaborate. He didn't. Well, I asked, what is it? Kier tipped his head to me. Call me, he said. I'll be happy to trade my knowledge for some of yours. On that note, he gave a slight bow and walked to the next room. Lou grinned at me. I think you have an admirer. I hardly know the guy, I denied. Sometimes chemistry is instant, Lou said. There's a few things I want to check out upstairs before this event gets going. Let's get together soon. You got it, I told her. Hot, right? My sister said in my ear when she came up behind me. Luann? Who's Luann? The woman I was just talking to, dope? Marigold shook her head. I was talking about Kier, dope, she countered. I told you you'd like him. I set the book back in the box and noted the lot number on my bidding sheet. And you were wrong then and wrong now. I don't like him at all. But you agree he's sexy as hell. I pursed my lips for a moment, then acquiesced. He's definitely sexy. Before she could get too excited, I added, but too slick for my taste. Marigold wiggled her brows. I'm sure he tastes like blue diamonds and green clovers. Don't ruin Lucky Charms for me. The auction will start in 10 minutes, a man announced. Bidding will take place in the ballroom. Please follow the red arrows. Did you find anything you want? I asked Marigold. I have my eye on the Vaseline vase, an incense diffuser that looks like it had been crafted for the Dalai Lama himself, and a beaded chandelier that would look awesome in my meditation room. Marigold nodded to me. You? Oh, I have my eye on something. I folded the top of the box closed. And if I am really lucky, I won't have to spend more than $20 to get it. Chapter 4. It was after 9 and dark by the time we got home, and I had enlisted my strapping teenager to haul my auction booty into the house. Christ, Mom, Michael complained. Did you buy a box of bricks? Close, I told him. You got the first and last letters right. He groaned. How many freaking books do you need? Quit giving your mom a hard time, Marigold said. Sure, we might see her on one of those reality TV shows someday where the hosts are hauling crap out of her house. She let the implication linger. I shook my head. I had full bookshelves in my living room and in my bedroom, but as long as there was room to walk around, there was room for more books. I like to push the boundaries between collecting and hoarding. Michael plunked the lot box down on the coffee table. Mission accomplished. I walked over to him and tugged on his arm. He dipped his face so I could kiss his cheek. Thank you for the muscle, babe. He grunted and gave a light shrug. Marigold, who had finished moving her auction finds to her car, walked into the house behind us. She nudged Michael with her shoulder. You excited about your senior year? I don't know, he muttered on another shrug. My son was at an age where most questions from anyone older than 18 were viewed as a challenge. I could ask him how his day was, and he'd act like I'd accused him of murder. I stuck to statements when talking to the kid. Marigold accepted the answer and moved on to her next question. You got any summer plans? Michael flashed a quick look at me and then shook his head. Not really. Are you seeing anyone? His eyes widened like a deer in the headlights. A large part of me wanted to rescue my boy from his aunt's interrogation. However, a smaller part of me wanted to see the kid squirm a little, but I suppressed that part. I flicked my fingers in Marigold's direction. Tell your aunt good night. The corner of his mouth quirked up. Night, Aunt Marigee. Good night, baby boy. She winked at him. After Michael left the room, she turned her attention back to me. He's not really going to bed, right? When I was his age, I never saw the backside of my eyelids until well after midnight, even on school nights. He has practice early tomorrow morning, but I'm sure he'll be playing video games into the wee hours. I was just throwing him a lifeline. I stroked the top of the lot box, my fingers itching to get to the contents. However, I'm going to call it an early night. I yawned dramatically. Big day today. I'm exhausted. Marigold shook her head. She gave me a bland look. You're right. It was a big day. You had to put on a whole bra and leave the house. I chucked a throw pillow from the couch at her. Marigold laughed as she easily caught the fluffy projectile. She held at arm's length to look at the front. Oh my gosh! Her eyes widened. These are not cabbage flowers. I snickered. Nope. And what does your son think about having decorative penises on the couch? I've had it on the couch since December. He hasn't even noticed, not once. I glanced around the room. An editor friend of mine from Kentucky sent it to me at Christmas time for a laugh. Did it work? I smiled. It did. So, my sister tapped her chin as she strolled toward my auction hall. What's so special about the books that prompted you to get in a bidding war with a 70-year-old used bookstore owner? I wanted to punch Mr. Jarlsberg in his bifocals, I muttered. The old guy had been determined to win, but not at any cost. $200 had been his limit, so I'd won the bid for the not-so-low price of $201. I'm just glad no one else wanted them. Marigold tossed the penis pillow onto the couch and flipped the top cardboard flap open. I swatted it down. Hey, don't touch my box. She raised her hands in surrender, then eyed me suspiciously. "Did you find a first edition of Shakespeare's Folio in there?" "I wish," I snorted. One had sold the previous year for almost $10 million. I'd be set for life. I sat down on the couch. Honestly, I don't know what I'm going to find in there. I only looked at the top book, and I have no idea what it's about. I frowned at Marigold. Have you ever had a moment when you saw something and you just knew you had to have it? The last time that happened to me, I ended up spending a Saturday afternoon in a free clinic. I snorted a laugh. I don't think anything in this box will require a penicillin shot. My sister arched her brow and smirked. You say that now. I stood back up and started walking toward the door. If I end up with a rash, I'll call you. All right, I get it. Marigold backed up toward the exit. You want to be alone with your dusty old books. The minute she was out the door and it was closed between us, I stripped off my bra and sat back down on the couch. I rubbed my hands together like a maniacal supervillain. It had more to do with the way my skin tingled around the box more than any vision of world domination. I glanced around the room to make sure I was alone, as if I were doing something wrong. Taking a deep breath, I centered myself. Why couldn't I shake off the feeling of excitement, anticipation, and even a little danger? The leather-bound book with the upside-down triangle with the line sat undisturbed on the top of the other books. I carefully lifted it from the container just in case it was more fragile than it appeared. The other 4 books in the box were literary omnibuses. Nothing too exciting, but I was glad to add them to my collection. However, those could wait until later. As I placed the mysterious tome on my lap, a mighty whoosh, as if I'd just driven my car 80 miles an hour over the top of a steep hill, rushed through my body. The burst of adrenaline made my hands cold and shaky as I opened the book to the first page. A handwritten inscription was centered at the top. Blood of my blood, a sacrifice required. Tears of my tears, bring what's most desired. A journey not entered lightly, magic you must hold tightly. Once it's begun, it cannot be undone. Goddess help you. I blinked at the final line and blew out a breath I'd been holding. That's not ominous or anything. A sting on my left index finger made me jerk my hand out from under the book. A smear of blood coated my fingertip. I flipped the cover shut to see what I'd cut myself on. A barb of silver thread poked out from the stitching on the top border. I wouldn't have noticed it if it weren't for the dark spot where my blood had colored the leather. Shoot. I rushed the book to the kitchen and placed it on the table before rifling through my towel drawer for a white washcloth. Other than a quick rinse of my finger to make sure the wound wasn't more than a tiny prick, I kept my focus on the book. I needed to get the bloodstain out before it set and ruined the mint condition of the leather. I ran cold water over the terry cloth and wrung out the excess. Quickly, I dabbed the damp cloth onto the affected spot and nearly jabbed myself a second time. Son of a bitch! What are you doing? Michael asked. I jumped because until he'd spoken, I hadn't even noticed he'd come into the kitchen. I turned around to face him and slid the book so that it was partially hidden. Cripes, son! I'm going to put a bell around your neck. You're so weird, he said as he grabbed a bottle of juice from the fridge. He threw the cap into the trash, then left without a second glance in my direction. I'd tried to hide the book from him. But why? I'd done it instinctually and without any thought. I'd also slapped the top flap down on the box earlier when my sister had tried to get a peek at the book. I faced the leather-bound tome, the excitement from earlier returning. Oh my God, I'm turning into Gollum, and this book is my precious. So be it. I scooped the precious up and carried it out the back door to the garden. It was dark out, but the garden was lit with fairy lights. Plenty bright enough for me to do a cursory examination. However, I grabbed a small flashlight and a magnifying glass from the kitchen drawer in case I needed them. I sat down on the bench, and the stupid gnome was staring at me. I was going to ground Michael until he graduated from college. Stop staring at me, Linda, I told the stony thorn in my ass. It's mine. I stroked the cover again. All mine. I glared at the gnome, its beady eyes twinkling in the glow of the fairy lights. Don't judge me. I hoped the new feeling of obsession was divorce-related and not my sanity leaving the building. I opened the book once more and tried to shake off the feeling of crazy. The page after the inscription was blank. I flipped to the next, then the next, and so on until I was absolutely certain they were all blank. What in the world? I'd been so excited after that initial inscription. Every fiber of my being had been jazzed as if I were on the verge of something amazing. I clapped the book shut. That sucks. You're a dunce, someone said. The voice was low and graveled. I darted my gaze around the dimly lit garden. Michael? It hadn't sounded like him, but he'd taken great joy in startling me at the most unexpected times. I swear, if you don't show yourself, I'm going to take your video games away. It was the most expedient threat to get a response from him, but no gotcha followed. Hey, Floppy Tits. If you want to invoke your grimoire, you have to make your intention known, the disembodied voice growled. Nope. I jumped to my feet. I have a gun. My threat was empty. I didn't actually have a gun, and even if I did, I wouldn't carry it on me. I'm quaking in my Winkelpickers. I held the book tightly to my chest. None of the plants were tall enough to hide a grown human, and my backyard garden was small. Unless the voice belonged to a ghost, I was having an auditory hallucination. One that called me floppy tits and said things like Winkelpickers. There's no one here, I told myself. I'm suffering a psychotic break induced by divorce. Plain and simple. You're right about one thing. A rock hit my shins. I looked down and saw my bearded, pink-clad gnome Linda in the flesh and flipping me the bird. You really are plain and simple. Chapter 5. Sit down, droopy poops, before you pass out. The gnome had a slight accent, German in origin if I were to hazard a guess. I sat back down on the bench, and not because I was obeying an inanimate object that had suddenly animated. It had more to do with the fact that the ground felt as if it were shifting under my feet. There you go, the gnome said. Deep breaths now. Every word it said made me even dizzier. Stop talking. Too late for that, lazy apples. I pressed my palms into my forehead. What is your obsession with my breasts? You're the one who insists on going au naturel. The tiny bearded asshole waved its hands around its chest to emphasize. I'm having a nightmare. I squeezed my eyes shut. This isn't real. This is the result of day-old takeout, the divorce, and lack of sleep. Any minute, I'm going to wake up. Sharp pain on my forearm grabbed my attention. Ow! I glared at the gnome, who was making pincer motions with her index finger and thumb. Not a dream, Baggy. I snapped my fingers. Enough of that. I wore a B cup for Pete's sake. If there was any sagging at all, it was minimal. If you're going to insist on talking to me, the least you can do is keep your not-so-flattering nicknames to yourself. You're going to have to develop a thicker skin if you want to learn the secrets of Terracraft. Michael! I yelled. Why are you calling the boy? I'm going to need him to call 911. Go to South Hill Village, they said, the gnome lamented. It will be fun, they said. I narrowed my gaze on the wee monster. Who's they? My Dancy, of course. We felt your power at your birth, and I followed you here to this goddess-forsaken mountain craphole. There was a lot to process in what the gnome just said, but first I had to know, what's a Dancy? A group of gnomes, ignorant Kleinkind. I was reasonably sure Kleinkind wasn't a compliment, but at least it wasn't another derogatory nickname for my boobs. And what are Winkelpickers? Technically, they're Krakows. It picked up one of its feet and gestured to its pointy shoe. But the more modern version of the long pointed-toed shoe is called a Winkelpicker. I picked these suckers up in London, England, back in the 60s. I groaned. So, what's your name? Linda is fine. The gnome tugged its beard. I've gotten used to it these past few years. Besides, my real name is impossible to pronounce. I got the feeling Linda wasn't telling me something important. Are you a boy, gnome? Even if I were male, I wouldn't be a boy. I'm old enough to have seen 2 centuries come and go, Kleinkind. You didn't tell me what a Kleinkind was. I'm not here to teach you German. You can look it up on your own time. Aha, I was right about the German. So, you're a girl, female, I mean. I'm a nomad, yes, Linda agreed. A female of my kind. She shook her head. I was certain the beard gave it away. Don't all gnomes have beards? She gave me a withering glare. Of course. She followed up with a string of foreign expletives that made me cringe. I'm not here to school you in gnome gendering either. Some of the shock had worn off, and annoyance was setting in. Then what the hell are you here for? I mean, if it's to point the way to a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow, lead the way. Otherwise, what good are you? Linda's cheeks turned the color of beets. I am not a leprechaun. You giant pimple on my ass. I'm a gnome, a powerful earth spirit. I have fought in 2 major wars against die Hexenmeister, and I have tutored over 20 warrior witches in Terracraft. She shook her tiny fist at me. Call me a leprechaun one more time. I didn't know whether to be afraid of Linda or not. On the one hand, she was a foot tall and weighed 20 pounds when she was stone. How much damage could she do? On the other hand, she was walking and talking, and who knew what other tricks she might have up her sleeves. I decided, as my therapist would call it, to de-escalate. Chill your panties, Linda. I didn't mean anything by it. I just figured you were all in the same family of whatever you are. We are not. Leprechauns are fairies, and not even one of the good kinds. Her tone suggested she was still grudging. But I'll let it go for now. Did you say you were going? This is where I live, stupid witch, Linda said. I felt your potential all the way across the ocean when you were born, but I'm worried it will never develop. You are too closed off to the veil. You can't master true craft with a limited mind. My mind is not limited, I said defensively, my brows pinched together. Did you say witch? She ignored me. The best I can hope for is to teach you enough to keep you from becoming ether dust. I don't know what that means. It means, Linda scooped up a handful of dirt from the rosemary bed and sprinkled it on the paving stones. The magic will burn through you like you are puking and crapping solar flares until your flesh and bones turn to a magical ash that will recycle your magic into the world. The gnome scratched her head. Come to think of it, that might not be a bad alternative. I didn't try to hide my horror. Speak for yourself. What do you think I'm doing? She gave me a complete duh look. I would never speak for anyone else. I am going to wake up soon, and this horrible nightmare is going to be over. If you don't wake up soon and jumpstart your magic, you're going to get more of a nightmare than you ever imagined. There are forces in the world that want what you have. If you don't fight for it, they will take it from you. Before or after I turn to dust? Yes, Linda replied. Magic isn't real. Neither are talking gnomes, she said, beating me to the punch. But here we are. You're going to have to readjust your way of thinking about reality, Kleinkind. And fast. If you don't, you won't survive the transformation. I don't want to transform. You should have thought about that before you blooded the grimoire. I did what? You melded your blood with the magic. The book is glowing with the spark of power. It just needs your intention. I shook my head. Why now? If it's true that I was born with magic, why am I just seeing it now? In fiction books, these kinds of things always happened to someone on the precipice of adulthood, usually someone more my son's age than mine. I'm 43 years old, after all, not some young babe reaching a milestone age. The gnome drew closer to me, and she placed her bitty palm on my arm. She closed her eyes, the lines around them creasing deeply as she hummed. When she finished, she took a step away. You weren't ready before. And I am now, I snorted. Huh, that's awfully convenient. I mean, if old Mrs. Boothwell hadn't died, I'd have never bought the books, and all this weird crap wouldn't be happening right now. A thought jumped into my head. The book. I slid it off my lap and onto the bench beside me. That batty old woman laced it with some kind of drug. A hallucinogen like PCP or LSD. My lord, that accounts for all of this. Even the feelings I was getting during and after the auction. I'm drugged. I said the last as if I were declaring Eureka. Right now, I could use some drugs, Linda said sardonically. It might be the only thing that keeps me from strangling you. I giggled. I don't think you can get your microfingers around my neck. A loud meow startled me. A small, fluffy animal skittered across my yard. I eeped, but just as quickly the damn thing ran into my house. It had been a cat, right? I mean, I'd heard a meow, but it had been hard to tell. Why was my back door open? I was sure I'd shut it when I went outside. Of course, I'd been eager to study the book and I was on drugs, so maybe I hadn't. Cripes, this acid trip was doing my head in. Did you just see a cat run into my house? I felt woozy. Linda threw up her hands and stomped around. You're no good to me like this, and you're definitely no good to yourself. You might as well go to bed. We'll get at it early tomorrow morning after Michael leaves for practice. The fact that the gnome knew my son's schedule was another vote for drugs. That's a grand idea, Linda. I left the book on the bench so that I wouldn't contaminate myself with whatever substance had been smeared on it and walked into my house. I'm going to bed. I'll be seeing you in the morning, Kleinkind. I winked at her as I staggered inside. Not if I see you first. Chapter 6. I had passed by several trees before I realized I was walking in a forest. No cedar or pine for sure, so not anywhere on the mountain where I lived. I'd gone to bed, right? Yeah. I am pretty sure I'd fallen face first onto my pillow without even taking off my clothes. Phew. Whatever drugs the old lady had used on those books was really kicking in hard. If there was an afterlife, I'm sure she was out there somewhere laughing her wrinkled ass off at me. I wish I could say this was the first time I'd experienced being on a hallucinogenic. Once in college, I'd accidentally taken shrooms. In my defense, I thought they were dried shiitakes. Seeing things that weren't there scared the crap out of me. Turns out I wasn't a roll with the psychedelic flow kind of gal. Luckily, my roommate, Ashley Porter, had stayed with me the whole night, reminding me to breathe and remain calm. Take deep breaths, she said. None of this is real. It can't hurt you. For whatever reason, Ashley had looked like an angel in my delusions, with full halo and wings. It had been easy to trust an angel. But now, it seemed, I was alone on this drug-induced journey. It was harder to believe it wasn't real and it wouldn't hurt me. Wet moss squished between my toes as I focused on staying relaxed and riding this high out to its conclusion. That is, until I heard a woman's voice through the trees. Earth beneath me, sustaining life. Air around me, breathing life. Fire above me, authority of life. Water within me, refreshing life. By the end of the incantation, a vocalized song of joy swelled. I didn't know how many voices had enjoined to create the wordless music, but the harmonies were pitch perfect. This hallucination was getting trippier by the minute. A full moon appeared in the sky and lit a path through the trees. My brain said nothing good ever happens when you go into the light, but my body was like, "Whee, a light!" Your body is on drugs too, I reminded myself. But as the chorus of lovely sounds grew louder and more insistent, my movement toward the lit path became less of a want and more of a need. One moment I was surrounded by dense trees, and the next I was stepping out into an open field with 5 tall obelisks arranged in a circle. Inside the ring there were 11 people in robes and a 12th standing at an altar of sorts. It was tall enough to reach the woman's hips, and it looked like it was made of 4 stacked slab stones that were white in color and glowed like a beacon. Again, my brain told me to stay put, but my heart told my brain to go to hell as I traversed the field toward the beautiful song and radiant circle. The singing stopped. "Come, child," a robed woman near the altar said. She had blonde hair, and there were symbols carved into her face on her cheeks, chin, and forehead. "That had to hurt," I said. She looked confused for a moment, then smiled as she touched her cheeks. "Welcome, Iris Everly of South Hill Village, descendant of Island McGee. We have been waiting for you." Her voice was like silk against my skin, and I was betting if she pulled back her hood and took off her robe, she, like my roommate, would have a halo and wings. "Are you an angel too?" "Do you meet many angels?" she asked. "Only when I'm tripping balls," I replied. She gave me a tight smile. "This Druid Circle has been convened to welcome you, child of Earth, and aid you in your transformation." Druids had not been on my drug delusions bingo list. Thanks, I guess." The woodsy scent of heather and lavender, a combination of masculine and feminine, surrounded me as I was suddenly inside the circle. I glanced around at the other robed figures, but the shadows cast by their cowls made it hard to see any faces. I should have been scared. An intelligent person would have been. But I wasn't. Because, acid trip. Runic carvings decorated the surface of the wide altar. On the flat top was a circle of small dark stones, a bowl of water, incense, and candles. "Are you ready?" the woman asked me. I shrugged. "Sure." "Name your intention." Not that nonsense. Linda had told me that I needed to make my intention known. I had no idea what she'd been talking about. I still didn't. But this was my hallucination. Maybe that meant there was something inside my subconscious or in my psyche that did. Perhaps it had been in one of those textbooks I'd edited. Intention sounded very much like a psychology thing. But the last psych book I'd covered was 2 years ago, and its focus had been on child psychology. I'd found it interesting because I could see things in Michael that the book talked about as far as ages and stages went. Still, I didn't remember any specific part that talked about intention. "I don't understand what you want." Or maybe it was what I wanted. No, what I wanted was for this drug to metabolize its way out of my system so I could get on with my life. I made a mental note to go to the emergency room when I found my way back to reality so I could get my blood tested. I would need the evidence for when I sued the Boothwell estate and the auction house for poisoning me. Luckily, I knew a lawyer who would take the case on the cheap. "What do you want me to say?" "The words matter not, my child. The magic will know your heart." I almost laughed. It had been over a year since I'd had anything more than pain and resentment in my heart. I wasn't sure that was an intention I wanted to put out there. "I think I'd prefer magic to mind its own business." There was a chuckle from someone in the robed circle. The woman, who I assumed was the boss since she was doing all the talking, gave the offender an admonishing glance before turning her attention back to me. "My dear, it doesn't work that way." The woman waved her hands in the air. Shimmering trails of sparkly dust floated above her. "Now that your magic has been activated, it must have an intention or it becomes wild." "Is that such a bad thing?" "Wild magic grows like weeds, choking the life out of everything in its path." I remembered what Linda had said about magic burning through me and I'd puke and fart solar flares. Oh my God. Was the sparkly haze above this woman someone who'd burned so hot they turned to ash? I focused on keeping my breath slow, and even as I reminded myself, this was a hallucination. but holy crap, the mounting panic attack felt pretty freaking real. I don't feel very well. Choose, Iris, the woman said with more insistence. Between what? The Grimoire has chosen your true craft. Your element is Terra. She gestured to crystals on the altar. Pick one. It will know your intention. I was beginning to hate that word. What are my options? I mean, other than wild choking weeds. There are 2 disciplines of mage, the Fade and the Bright. Your intent— I held up a hand to stop her. Fade and Bright. What's the difference? Is that like black and white magic, bad and good? There is no such thing as bad or good magic, but the Fade and the Bright are opposite sides of the same coin. One cannot exist without the other. Your true heart will choose for you if you cannot. Please. She gestured to the crystals more insistently. Take one. I noticed she wasn't touching the crystals. Maybe they were laced with drugs as well. Could I get drugged by a delusion? Probably not, but why take the chance? I'm the kind of woman who has to read over a contract 4 or 5 times and run it past my lawyer before I commit to anything. I'll pass. I insist, the bossy blonde said. Next thing I knew, I was inches from the altar. So trippy. You first, I said. She gave me a bland look, then snapped her fingers. One of the robed underlings strolled to the altar and picked up one of the crystals. The hands were large, masculine, but well manicured. As he reached out to take the offering, I noted a dark mark, possibly a scar, in a shape similar to a star on his wrist. He grasped the clear crystal, holding his hand in a tight fist around the gemstone. A surge of energy zipped through me, then it was gone. When he turned his hand supine and opened his fingers, the clear crystal had turned a luminescent white. Is that the Bright? She nodded and gestured for another of her robed minions to come over. This one had more delicate hands with slender fingers. This one had a nice manicure too, but it was harder to tell if the person was a woman or a man. The process was repeated. The minion grasped the crystal, energy spiked, and when the crystal was revealed, it looked like a crystal-cut piece of onyx. Neat. My eyes widened. I take it that's the Fade? Very good, the woman said. Now it's your turn. I took a step back. I thought you said it wasn't about black or white magic. I've never been a religious person, but really don't want to be putting any evil crap out into the world. Once more, I was only inches from the altar. Well, damn it. Do you want to die, child? She asked. I do not, I admitted, although there was a good chance I was half dead and lying in my backyard right now. I remembered walking into the house, but then I was here in this super flat forest that wasn't anywhere near a mountain. So chances were good I'd overdosed on whatever I'd been exposed to. I chose to be optimistic about my survival, though. After all, I was still self-aware. That was a good thing, right? What if I change my mind later? Can I change from bright to fade? You know, like my very own mood rocks? Black for when I'm ready to kill my ex and white for when I'm watching my kid tackle a quarterback? Oh, for Beck's sake! The blonde's exasperation made her glow, and not in a soothing way. It's for your own safety and the safety of those around you. When I say your magic will suffocate the life around you if you let it go wild, I mean your life and the life of those you love. Think of your son, Iris. Pick up the damn crystal. I held up my hands in surrender. Sheesh, okay. Don't go nuclear or anything. I tapped the nearest crystal, one about the size of my thumb, the way someone might tap a stovetop to make sure it wasn't hot. It wasn't hot, or cold for that matter. There were no sparks or pain or any explosions as I plucked it from the surface and placed it in the palm of my hand. Now what? Close your eyes and will you're in— She shook her head. Just close your eyes and think of what makes you who you are. What are your best characteristics? What are the things in life that are most important to you? That will make your role in our world clear. Or cloudy, Get it? I jested. Because the crystal turns opaque? The woman didn't look amused. All right, I told her. If squeezing this piece of quartz will get me out of this crazy fantasy, I'll give it a go. I curled my fingers slowly around the piece. There was no energy like with the other two people. Was I doing something wrong? You have to think, the blonde said. Got it. Think. What made me who I am? I'd been found when I was a few weeks old. My mother had said I'd been surrendered, aka abandoned, to a hospital in Briarberry Falls, a town on the other side of the mountain. No family came forward to claim me, so I'd gone into the system. My mother, Grace Everly, had been friends with a child protection officer and had taken me in as a foster. She and my dad, Randall Everly, officially adopted me 14 months later. I'd been a blank slate, someone without a name, without any legacy. My parents had changed that for me. In a way, it was their generosity that had made me the person I had grown into. But there was also Evan. I'd met him in college, and with him, I became something more than what my parents had made me. I became a lover, a wife, and a mother. And his cheating had shaped me even more. Was there a core part of me that stayed static? My head hurt considering all the possibilities, so instead I focused on characteristics. I was detail-oriented. It made me really good at my job as an editor. I had empathy, which sometimes didn't feel like a good thing. It meant I cared about other people, but sometimes those feelings overwhelmed me. My father said I was a fighter from the get-go, and that he could tell from the moment he had first laid eyes on me that I would be his little warrior. I think it was his nice way of saying I was stubborn as hell. My mom always told me I was smart, and that with my brains, I could accomplish anything I set my mind to. I thought about my current predicament. Divorced, living like a hermit, and having a hallucination that would have sent Janis Joplin running for rehab. A pulsing force rushed from my fist up my arm and into my body. I felt electrified with power as the exhilaration washed over me. The wind kicked up around me, blowing my hair across my face. It startled me enough to falter, and the energy began to ebb. No, keep going, Iris, the woman said. It is here. Let your fear go, and your life can begin anew. I shook my head. I liked my life. I didn't want to start over. Only signing those divorce papers had pretty much solidified that I was getting a do-over, whether I liked it or not. I held up my hand, and the ground beneath my feet trembled. Earth, I whispered. That's it, young one, a man said. I felt a hand on my shoulder, then another on my arm, and another and another. I didn't have to open my eyes to know the robed circle had gathered near my position, and they were all touching me. Oddly, I wasn't scared by their presence. They had the opposite effect. For the first time in months, I felt supported and safe. I held the crystal tighter as the dirt, the trees, and the rocks all sang. I understood with utter clarity that they contained all the answers to the universe. I had but to listen. A mound of dirt and grass grew over my feet. Vines weaved their way up from the ground and wrapped themselves slowly around my ankles, encircling my legs. I expected the panic to return, but it didn't. Like the hands that were on me, the vines acted as a kind of security blanket, or at least they felt that way. I didn't even blink twice as the persistent ivy wrapped around my waist and my chest and slithered out onto my arms. It was only when it began to cover my face that my eyes snapped open. This is wrong. I struggled to get loose from the snaking greenery, turning me into a bad version of Batman's nemesis Poison Ivy. You are ready, Iris, the woman said. It's time to let go. I can't, I told her. Let go, Iris, she insisted. Let go now. I struggled to open my hand, but when I finally managed, the stone was gray. I don't understand. The look of consternation on the woman's perfect brow told me she was confused as well. What does this mean? We shall meet again, Iris. And when we do, you must have mastered earth magic. If you don't... She spread her arms out as if that were some kind of explanation. If I don't, then what? Before I could get an answer, the vine around my neck yanked me, and I lost my balance and fell backward. "Until we next meet," was the last thing I heard before my alarm clock went off at 6 a.m. "Oh, God," I murmured. My head felt as if someone had bludgeoned me with a baseball bat. I blinked as I smacked the snooze button. Maybe Michael would get himself up for practice. It could happen, right? Mama had a doozy of a hangover. What in the world had that old lady laced the book with? I would have thrown it in the fireplace if it wasn't for the fact that I might need it as evidence when I sued the pants off of whoever I could sue. But first, I needed to get Michael up and off to practice. I would go to the hospital after. My brother Rowan, named for both the rowan tree and for his shock of red hair, was a family practitioner in town, and I knew he'd order the test for me without too much fanfare. The distant sound of a motorboat gave me pause. I lived nowhere near a lake. The sound was persistent and growing louder, and it was right behind me. I turned as fast as my achy head would let me. Meow. I vaguely remembered a cat running into the house last night. At least that part hadn't been a hallucination. The white and orange ball of fluff was nesting on what used to be Evan's side of the bed, staring at me with its big green eyes and happily purring as if it had hit the mother lode. "Get off my bed," I told it. The cat flopped over onto its back, and I could see now that it had 2 tiny balls between its back legs. "Congratulations," I said. "It's a boy." I scratched his belly. I couldn't help myself. He was super cute, and his dopey expression made him even more adorable. Evan had been allergic to cats and dogs, so we never had any pets. I rolled onto my back and made a mental note to call a veterinarian today. I would see if the cat was chipped and had an owner, and if it didn't, maybe I'd keep him. Or maybe not. I decided it was best not to make any decisions until I was sure I was no longer under the influence. I sat up and swung my legs off the bed until I was sitting up. My feet itched, so I pulled the left one up first and set it on my right knee. Oh! I blinked as my stomach knotted. My hand shook as I reached down and plucked an ivy leaf from between my dirt-crusted toes. Was I still seeing delusions? Michael knocked on my bedroom door, then poked his head in. "Hey, Mom. I'm catching a ride with Doug. We're going to run before practice." His brow dipped when his gaze shifted to my feet. "Did you do some barefoot gardening this morning?" "So you see this? You see the dirt on my feet?" I asked him. "Yeah, I'm not blind." He gave me the duh look. He shook his head at me. "I have to go." Sure," I told him absently. "Have a good day." He closed the door harder than necessary, and the slam made me jump. I looked around for the cat. Michael hadn't mentioned the cat. "Where are you?" I felt a whisker against my right ankle as he scooted out from under the bed. I scratched his head as I contemplated what it meant that I had dirt on my feet and leaves between my toes, but remarkably there were no tracks of soil and foliage on the floor. How had I gotten into bed with muddy feet without leaving a trail? The cat growled, and I could feel his hackles raise. "I'll smite you, impudent imp," a familiar voice said. "I don't even need a good reason." Oh, hell, Linda. "You're not real," I said. The little asshole standing in my bedroom doorway ignored me. "Out of bed, Kleinkind. Your child is not the only one who needs to practice." "I hate you, Linda." "I don't care if you hate me as long as you mind me." Linda threw the words I'd used with Michael back at me. The cat hissed at her, and Linda pulled a knife from her pink tunic. "None of that, or I'll be having imp sushi for breakfast." "Okay, then," I said, throwing back the covers. Psychotic break round 2. Chapter 7. I got up, ignoring the proverbial elephant, or in this case, gnome, in the room. Linda wasn't real. She was outside in my garden, and the thing that was following me to the bathroom, and using some pretty colorful language, was part of my delusion. "Be gone," I told her as I poured my first cup of coffee. I had gone to half-calf because of an ulcer I recently developed. I would love to, but I can't go until I know you won't do anything catastrophically stupid. I burned my tongue as I took a sip of coffee. Like what? I blew inside the rim, then set the cup down. Linda's lips thinned in a tight grimace. Like leveling the mountain. Okay. Did you hear what I said? The gnome demanded. I did, I told her. Which is why I'm pretty sure leveling a mountain with magic, I wiggled my fingers around, is the least of my problems. If the drug screen came back negative, I would have to see if our family psychologist would give me a discount. The cat jumped up on my counter. It was missing a tail. Did someone cut it off? I examined the nub. It flipped back and forth as he quickly turned and rubbed his head against my hand. You are a sweetie. He's a dolt, Linda said. She pointed to her pointy hat. Nothing between the ears. Much like his witch. That's a terrible thing to say, I cooed at the floofy little love bug. You're such a smart boy. He literally isn't, Linda said. It's by design. What's by design? Imps are empty vessels. Tools for witches and not much good for anything else. The cat caught sight of a fly and it leaped off the counter, catching the fly mid-air, then landing on the ground, the insect still trapped between its two front paws. Huh! I gestured to the cat. He caught that sucker in one go. I shook my head. Not much good for anything else, huh? He's a freaking hunter. A mighty little warrior who will have my house pest-free in no time. Halfway through my victory speech, the cat rolled onto his back and opened his paws. The fly, apparently unharmed, flew away. Linda snickered. Yup, he's a ferocious beast. The cat flipped to its feet and pounced at something else under the table. There, I said. He just had bigger prey to go after. Heavens be praised, Linda said as she plucked the cat's spoils from the ground. He has made your home safe from this robber band. Never more will the foul creature wreak havoc upon your domain. She placed the rubber band on the tip of her finger and shot it at the trash bin. It spun the top as it went in. I cast you out, devil. This beast of burden, she gestured dramatically to the cat, has slain you, and your days of darkening the doorsteps of the witless are over. I really do hate you, I told her. I know. She bowed to me with an exaggerated flourish. And I'm okay with that. She gave the cat a scratch on the ear. What will you name him? I can't keep him. Look at him. He's too friendly not to belong to someone else. He belongs to someone, all right, Linda pointed at me. You, Kleinkind. He belongs to you. I picked up the fur ball, and he let me hold him like a baby. His purring kicked up a notch as I rubbed his belly. I would have remembered adopting this adorable Chonky. As it is with his kind, he picked you. The gnome looked bewildered. Though I've never heard of a witch being chosen so quickly, especially one that has come to the true craft so late in life. Hey, I said. Didn't you say you were a couple of centuries old? 43 is not that late. Not for a gnome, but for a witch it's middle-aged. Linda hopped up on a chair. She was surprisingly fast and light on her feet. Most witches get activated in their late teens and early 20s. The fact that your power has remained latent until now is a mystery. Maybe he's just been waiting for you. Or, I countered, you, the cat, and everything else that's happened to me since yesterday is a manifestation of a depressive psychosis. Linda snorted. Okay, Randall. I recognized the reference from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. The movie starring Jack Nicholson came out sometime in the 70s, several years before I was born. Does that make you Nurse Ratched? My doorbell rang. Then I heard my sister Rose yell from the living room. Iris, are you up? I went deer in the headlights as she strolled into the kitchen. There you are. My younger sister had on a cream and gold patterned maxi dress. The top was cut tank top style and showed off her muscular arms courtesy of years of CrossFit training. I gave her a half-hearted wave. "Oh, hey, Rose. I was going to call you today." "Sure you were," she said as she poured herself a cup of coffee. Her sandy blonde hair was straight as a pin, and she wore it down past her shoulders. My parents had adopted Rose 3 years after me, and even as a child, she had been serious and sober in her demeanor. She joined me at the table, then looked down at the chair where Linda was standing. I almost eeped as Rose lifted her off the chair and set her on the counter. "Why is the garden gnome in the kitchen?" Linda had gone stony. Of course she had, I told myself. Linda was always stone. There was a..." I snapped my fingers. "She got knocked over outside, so I cleaned her up." Rose gave me a worried glance. "Are you sure you're okay, Iris?" "Oh, fine. Absolutely terrific." Why didn't I just tell Rose I'd been drugged? After all, she'd find out when I hired Dawn to be my lawyer to take the case. On top of that, Rose was great at problem solving. Hell, she'd not only arrange my drug testing and the lawsuit, but she'd also coordinate the police search for whoever supplied the drugs to the old lady in the first place. I opened my mouth to tell her what had happened, only I couldn't. Instead, I said, "You know, just having an off morning." "I can imagine." She nodded her head sympathetically. "Oh!" She got up from her seat. "What's that?" I looked under the table. The cat, who I'd forgotten about once my sister arrived and Linda went inanimate, was winding his way in and around Rose's legs. "Oh my gosh," she gushed. "Did you get a cat?" Sort of," I grimaced. "He showed up." "When?" "Last night, I think." She picked him up to get a better look. "He's tiny but solid. Someone's been feeding him well. Are you sure he's a stray?" "I'm not sure of anything." And I was talking about more than the cat. "You should see if he's chipped." Yeah, that was on my to-do list, along with getting drug tested and possibly checking myself into a psychiatric facility. "Look at his little bobbed tail." "Oh," her blue eyes brightened. "What if he's part bobcat, or all bobcat and just a runt?" "Sure." I snorted a laugh. "He's a bobcat." Rose smiled. "What's his name? I mean, if you're keeping him, he needs a name, right?" "Bob," I said. "Why not?" Rose laughed, and it was nice to see my sister relax for a moment. "Hi there, Bob," she said to the cat as she continued to scratch his belly. "Welcome to the family." "If he's not chipped," I added. Rose nodded. "Of course." "How are Drake and Dustin?" Drake and Dustin were Rose's Irish twins. They'd been born 10 months and 11 days apart, with Drake being the oldest. Even so, Dustin, like his mother, was the more serious-minded of the two boys. "They're good. I can't believe Drake is starting high school next year. I think he's both excited and terrified about becoming a freshman. Michael will look out for him." Rose smiled. "There are perks to having a star athlete as a cousin. How is Michael holding up?" "Oh, you know," I shrugged. "He has his good days and bad days. Evan moving in with Adam has thrown him off balance, but I'm sure he'll right himself soon enough." My sister nodded sympathetically. "Absolutely. He's a strong kid. Change is hard, but he'll get through it, especially with you in his corner." I laughed. I couldn't even keep my own sanity in check. How in the world was I going to help my son? I'd love to get to a point where I didn't love Evan anymore. At least then I could stop hating him for throwing our marriage in the trash. Rose put Bob down, then sat in Linda's chair. She put her hand on top of mine. "Why don't you let me hate him for you? That will free up your emotions for better uses." "I don't think it works that way. I wish it did." "Did Marigold introduce you to her friend?" "You mean Professor Snape?" "Oh, Marigold made it out like he was gorgeous. Was he really awful?" "No," I admitted. "Marigold wasn't wrong. He's very handsome." Then what's the problem? Was he rude? No, not rude. So tell me why you aren't interested. Maybe because I just signed my divorce papers 2 days ago? My tone bristled with annoyance. It's been over a year since Evan moved out and moved on. Don't you think it's time for you to do the same? I stood up and dumped my coffee in the sink. Maybe I'll stay single until I die a happy old spinster, I said. And I'm done having this conversation. I glanced at Linda, who was still in the same solid pose, wishing she was alive and calling me floppy tits again. I'll be ready when I'm ready, and until then, I don't need you or Marigold trying to set me up with anyone. We love you, is all, Rose said, unperturbed. Thank heaven she didn't get butthurt easily. But if you want us to back off, then that's exactly what we'll do. We will, huh? Rose stood up as I walked over to her and we hugged. We will, she agreed. I'm sorry, I told her. Maybe wait on the matchmaking until I have at least a week under my divorce. You got it. She squeezed me tighter. I have to get home. I promised the boys I'd take them to the pool today. Is that open already? The community pool had been around since we were kids, and when Michael was little, I loved taking him there and watching him play. Last weekend. Rose let me go. You and Michael come over for dinner Sunday night, okay? It wasn't as if I had better plans. I smiled. I'll tell Michael to keep his calendar open. My phone rang. The number came up as unknown. You going to get that? Rose asked. It's probably a robocall or a scammer. Her brow creased. At 7 o'clock in the morning? Ambitious. I ignored the rings as I said my goodbyes to Rose. When I went back into my kitchen, Linda the gnome was gone, Bob the cat was chasing a dryer sheet around the tiled floor, and my cell phone had one new message. Most robocalls didn't leave voicemails. I tapped the icon to listen to messages and put my phone on speaker as I rinsed my coffee cup and wiped it out. I recognized the smooth, sexy voice of Marigold's occult professor. This is Kier Quinn. I'm just checking in to see when you're available to meet and discuss my book. I'm free this afternoon if you have the time. You have my number. I could see the appeal of the man. Honestly, if I were less raw from getting my heart torn out, I might be hot for teacher. But right now, I had bigger fish to fry. Instead of calling Kier back, I called my brother about scheduling a rapid drug test. Chapter 8. I'd used rubber cleaning gloves to wrap cling film around the book and tucked it away in the box it came in. I double-taped the top and shoved it in my closet. I drove to the hospital after and spent over an hour waiting for the lab to call me back. It only took a few minutes to pee in a cup and have my blood drawn, a quick in and out. The nurse told me it would take 24 hours to get the results. My brother had encouraged me to contact the police. I told him I would if the lab found anything. There was no sense filing a crime report if I couldn't prove something had been done to me. Bob was sitting on the front porch when I got home. I didn't know how he'd gotten out of the house. By the same token, I'd had no idea how he'd gotten inside the night before. He made some adorable trill-like noises as I dug the house keys out of my purse. Hey, boy. I unlocked the door and opened it. Let me call one of the vets here in town and we'll take care of you next. Instead of going in, the cat took off like a shot around the house. Hey, come back! Damn it, Bob. I threw my purse in the door, then took off after him. My small backyard garden was surrounded by a privacy fence. I didn't see Bob, but there were spaces under the base where he could have tunneled in. I flung the gate open. But a clod of dirt and grass smacked me in my open mouth. I spit out what I could, then used the bottom of my t-shirt to get the mud off my tongue. Another dirt clod pelted me in the chest, then another smacked my ear. I danced around, scouring the garden for the source of the projectiles. My eyes widened as I found my target. Linda. My lip curled into a snarl as I clenched my fists and glared at the miniature bane of my existence. I was reasonably confident that whatever drug had been in my system was out. After all, I'd spent almost 2 hours away from the house without a single hallucination. So why was that stupid gnome alive and taking pot shots at me? What the actual fuck, Linda? Linda, who was standing on my bench now, had another dirt clod in her hand. I'm teaching you a valuable lesson, Kleinkind. And just what lesson would that be? She reared back and let loose with another zinger. I dropped to the ground and the clot hit the fence with a thud. That one had a rock in it, Linda. You could have really hurt me. The gnome crossed her arms and gave me a satisfied nod. You're a slow learner, but at least you can be taught. How am I slow? It took you getting hit 3 times before you ducked. She gave me a gotcha wink. But you eventually got there. That was the lesson? To duck? I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my tone. Failure is the greatest teacher, she said. The important part is that you keep going until you get it right. What kind of evil Yoda bullshit is this, Linda? Unlike Yoda, she countered, I write all my own material. I shook the dirt from my shirt and plucked a blade of grass from my hair. Is there a point to all of this? A chirping noise drew my attention. Oh! My heart did a backflip. Isn't he adorable? Bob was on his back near the yarrow plant playing with ladybugs. I love him so much. He's designed for you to love him, you dolt. Linda had a flair for words. I bet you won all kinds of popularity contests in high school. Do I look human to you? 2 arms, 2 legs, 10 fingers and toes, no third eyes or extra nostrils. I mean, other than your height, you look pretty human to me. I have 12 toes, she said. And I'm over 200 years old. So, no prom. Linda chucked a rock at me. It hit just above my right knee. Ow! I rubbed the spot. That really stings. She rolled her eyes. One of these days, you'll move out of the way, Kleinkind. What does that mean? I know you're insulting me, but I'm just not sure how. Like I said before, look it up. I will. My phone was in my purse, and I'd thrown my purse in the house. Once I get my cell phone. She stuck her tongue out at me. Can you keep an eye on Bob? I need to make an appointment with the pet clinic to see if he belongs to someone else. You can't do that, Linda said. And why not? 2 reasons. Bob belongs to you. I think that reason falls under wishful thinking. I've only just met Bob, and he might have owners who are very worried about him. What's reason number 2? Bob has 2 hots and no butthole. Excuse me? Clean the cotton out of your ears. More like dirt, I said. That you put there, by the way. I actually heard you, but I am super confused. It's simple, Wunderkind. Kind of like you, Bob has 2 hots. One for his life and one for yours. And no butthole. How does he poop? He doesn't. Bob doesn't eat, so he doesn't need to poop. But he has balls. Of course he does. Procreation is an essential function for imps. It's not like there's a familiar factory stamping them out down an assembly line. And imps do drink, so the fluid has to leave their bodies somewhere. Like milk and water? Linda snorted. Like whiskey and rye. She shook her head at my worried frown. But only on special occasions. Like when they get to procreate? See, I told you. Slow learner, but you get there eventually. Bob may not have an asshole, but you are one. Believe you me, Kleinkind, when a Hexenmeister comes for you, and von will, you'll be glad you have an asshole on your side. I find that hard to believe. Note to self. Look up Kleinkind and Hexenmeister. And imps and gnomes. I shook my head at Bob. No butthole. Ouch. Poor baby. Again, Linda said. He doesn't eat. Bob, in complete defiance of the grouchy gnome, chomped on a ladybug. Ew, Bob, no. He'll throw it up later, Linda assured me. I grimaced at the idea of a ladybug hairball. Terrific. I narrowed my gaze on the gnome. So this is really happening, isn't it? You, Bob, the bossy blonde in the bathrobe. Linda laughed. That description fits Bogmol as well as any I've heard. She is a bossy bitch. I said blonde. Linda shrugged. Tomatoes, potatoes. But all real. Slow, but I get there. I rolled my eyes. And I supposedly have some superpowers? Well, you can't leap tall buildings in a single bound or dodge bullets. She gave me a meaningful stare. You can't even dodge rocks. But yes, you are brimming with magic. Prove it. I wiggled my fingers. Teach me a spell or something. You should understand the fundamentals of Terracraft before doing actual spells. Blah, blah, obi-wonky-nomi. If the force is so strong in me, I should be able to do something with it. You watch entirely too much Star Wars. I like science fiction. It has gotten me through a rough time of late. She crossed her arms over her chest and tapped a winklepecker on a paving stone. After a few moments, she nodded. Fine. I think I can teach you a spell that won't end up with you demolishing your house. A jolt of fear ran through me. Is that a possibility? She looked contemplative, then said, We're probably fine. I shuffled nervously. What do I do? First, what was your intention? I don't know. The fade or the bright? Which one? My crystal went gray, I told her. That's unusual. Linda didn't say it like it was a good thing. What does gray mean? It means your magic is divided between fade and bright. She steepled her fingers. That's a recipe for disaster. I puckered my buck cheeks. Solar flares out of my ass kind of disaster? I'll have to do a little research. Linda waved her hand at me. But let's not focus on that right now. Is it normal to have both? Honestly, you're a first for me. But I haven't been around as long as some of the gnomes in my Donzi. So, in 200 years, you've never met anyone who carried both the fade and the bright? Nope. She hopped down from the bench and jogged over to me. Next, she offered me a small piece of gravel. What am I supposed to do with this? I want you to hold the pebble in your hand and search it with your mind to find any cracks or fissures. And when you find them, I want you to concentrate on stretching them open. Then what? Hopefully, the rock will fall apart in your palm. And if nothing happens? We'll try until something does happen. Got it, I said, taking the stone. Slow to learn, but I eventually get there. I held the piece of pea gravel in my hand and tried to think what a fissure would even look like. The community pool popped into my head. It had a seam along the center that divided the shallow end from the deep end. It had been a milestone marker for me when I was young. The day I could swim past it without being afraid of drowning made me feel so grown up. I'd been 11 at the time. I thought about what that seam had felt like as I rotated the rock in my hand, feeling for cracks, crevices, any weak spots. Are you focused? Linda asked. I nodded. Yes. Good. Now give your spell the nudge it needs with words. What words? I don't know any magic words. The spell will know what you want. It will read your thoughts. Then why do I have to say them at all? I didn't write the rule book, Kleinkind. Stop asking so many damn questions and do as I say. Fine. I sighed. I'm not a spontaneous writer, so this is going to be terrible. Cracks, crevices, seams. This felt ridiculous, but I did as Linda instructed. Crevices and cracks won't break no backs, but stretch them wide and they will divide. A surge of energy rushed through me and away as if I were sending it out into the world. Eagerly, I opened my hand. The rock was intact. I did something wrong. Or magic isn't real, bonehead. But it felt like something happened. Linda had gone 3 shades paler. Something definitely happened. I heard the wail of sirens in the distance. It sounds like the whole Southill EMS was being rolled out. Oh, crap. Please don't tell me I broke the mountain. Not the mountain, a man said. I whipped around and saw Keir Quinn standing in front of my gate. But you did drain the public pool. Hello, Quinn, Linda said. I was wondering when you would show up. Chapter 9. Keir's dark hair floated away from his head, drifting out like curls of smoke. I have sealed the crack. His voice vibrated with intensity. For now. He turned his glittering iron gaze on the gnome. Roxashyomus, lupus Ibean felchna. Gesundheit, I said as I tried to process what he'd just said about the pool. The siren stopped. That was a good sign, right? How do you know something happened at the pool? And why are you at my house? Even better question, how do you know where I live? If Marigold gave him my address, I was going to kill her. Linda, who had recovered some of her color, glared at the man. I go by Linda now, the gnome told him. Keir glared back. Why are you trying to destroy Southill, Earth Guardian? I'm not, Linda protested. That was all the girl. Girl? She couldn't mean me. I didn't do anything. I held out the intact piece of gravel. I couldn't even break a rock. Keir frowned. Because you broke a 50-foot wide piece of concrete instead. I shook my head. That can't be true. Linda pelted me with another clod. Please tell me you weren't focusing your energy on a pool filled with humans, Kleinkind? I wasn't. Only I had been. I'd been thinking about my triumphant swim from the kiddie side into the deep waters of adulthood, and the pool had been on my mind because of... Oh no, Rose. I shouldered my way past Keir and ran around the house to the front door. I flung it open, scrambling for my purse. What's wrong? Keir asked. Can I help? My sister and her kids. Oh, no. Please let them be safe. I tapped the screen over her number. After 4 rings, the call went to voicemail. This is Rose. You know what to do at the beep. I hung up and hit her number again. This is Rose. You know what to do at the beep. Please, Rose, answer the damn phone. Once more, the call went to voicemail. Dread and fear burned through my lungs. I squatted on my thighs, my lungs burning as I struggled to breathe. Keir knelt beside me. Rose is the youngest sister, right? He put his hand on my back. The heat of his palm seeped into my skin. The warmth eased some of my anxiety to the point where I could speak. She took the boys to the pool today, I hiccuped as I met his gaze. What if I've killed her? What if I've killed her family? Linda stood on the other side of me. She and Keir exchanged a look that made me worry even more. The gnome shrugged. Most witches can barely make dust levitate. There was a hint of pride in her voice. Keir's voice was soft and soothing, but with a hint of reprimand. This is why you don't start with spells. It dawned on me that this paranormal professor knew a little too much about what was happening with me. The timing of him showing up at my house, or in my life for that matter, wasn't a coincidence. The realization frightened me, but not enough to override my concern for my sister and her kids. I grabbed my keys and pushed myself up to a stand. My legs felt almost boneless as I swayed. Kier's hands dipped down, encircled my waist, and braced me up. Hang in there. His breath was silky against my neck, sending a shiver down my spine. It's going to be all right. You can't know that. What would Dawn do if something happened to Rose? What would either of them do if the boys were hurt or worse? The devastation would be too much to bear. I have to go. I have to find Rose. I pushed away from Kier and stumbled to the door. The phone, still gripped in my hand, rang. My knees buckled and I went down hard on them. Rose. It was Rose. I fumbled to answer and hung up instead. Son of a bitch! I hissed as I called her back. Another beep told me I had an incoming call. Kier gently took the phone, ended my call out, and accepted Rose's call in. He handed it back to me. Hello? I said quickly. Rose, are you there? Iris! She didn't sound hurt, angry, or devastated. On the contrary, Rose seemed exhilarated. You're not going to believe what happened. Are you okay? Yes, sorry, she said. My heart is thumping so loud right now I can barely think. Blood rushed back to my limbs, freeing my legs to move. What happened? You know how I told you this morning that I was taking the boys to the pool? Yes, I recall, I said. It was a warm day, but I was shivering. I think we had an earthquake. The concrete shook and the pool cracked open about an inch. It was enough to break the drain lines, the filters, and the pipes. Water is spraying everywhere. That's terrible. It's so cool, I heard Drake say. You should see it, Aunt Iris. You boys stay right next to me, Rose told her sons before returning to the conversation. Anyhow, the lifeguards were able to get everyone out, but wowza, the shaking knocked down a power line. Sparks were flying for a few seconds before the transformer fritzed and the power went out. Fire trucks, the police, and 2 ambulances are here, but no one was injured, thankfully. Still, it's totally nuts. Did you know we had fault lines through our town? I mean, that's what I heard one of the first responders say. Don said he didn't feel a thing at the office. Gosh, I hope the house is still standing when I get home. You only live about a mile from here. Did you feel it at your place? Maybe. Tears blurred my vision as I sagged with relief. I'm not sure. No one had been hurt. No one died. Iris? Rose asked. Are you okay? Now that I know you're all right. I wiped my eyes. I'm just glad you and the boys are safe. I'm glad you're safe too, she said. Are you sure you're okay? You seemed off this morning. I'm fine. Tell the boys I'll take them for ice cream next week. Love you. I disconnected the call before Rose could ask any more questions. She's okay? Kier asked. Yes, she and the kids are fine. I stared at him. But you knew. You said it would be all right. Linda clapped her hands together. Excellent. No harm, no foul. If laser beam eyeballs had been one of my superpowers, Linda would have been cut in half by my glare. You're kidding, right? Next time, you'll improve your aim. Next time? My voice raised an octave. Next time? There's not going to be a next time, Linda. I might be slow, but my mama hadn't raised an idiot. I rounded on Kier as the fear for Rose abated and my suspicion and anger returned. And you! I shook my finger at him. You son of a bitch! The fact that he was here, that he was talking to Linda, and that he knew magic existed might not tell me everything I needed to know, but it told me a lot. You manipulated my sister, didn't you? You used her to get me to that auction. He didn't deny it. You're the reason I bid on the box of toxic books. Even if they hadn't been drugged, the tomes had done me nothing but harm. Kier met my gaze. The light gray color of his eyes had turned to a darker pewter tone. I'm not the reason you found the grimoires. I only helped facilitate the opportunity. It was your ancestors' magic that drew you to them, as I hoped they would. I don't care about ancestors or magic. This is not me. Whatever you and the gnome have done to me, I want you to take it back. Linda hissed. Don't say that. Don't ever say that. Kier pursed his lips, his brow furrowed in consternation. You're a witch, Iris. A descendant of the Island McGee witches. This would have been easier had you been raised by your own kind, but it doesn't negate the fact that their magic is in your DNA, and it was going to manifest one way or another. I didn't know what to say. Was Kier telling me the truth, or was he telling me what he thought I needed to hear to get on board with whatever plan he and the gnome had for me? God, I sounded mad. Kier turned his hand over, palm up, and setting at the center was a gray shard, the one from my dream. Take your focus. You left it behind at the choosing. A star-shaped scar was on his wrist. I recognized it from my woodsy adventure the night before. You? He'd been the first person the blonde woman with the scars on her face had ordered to demonstrate what I was supposed to do. His crystal had turned white. You were one of the robed minions. Minions sounds about right, Linda chuckled. I'm not a minion. Is the blonde your leader? Of sorts, he admitted. And you do what she says? He pursed his lips, then said, Yes. I nodded. You're a total minion. Whatever you think of me, I am here to help you, Iris. If you don't master your magic, you will be in great danger. I'm not a witch, I said petulantly. Linda made an sound. The minion's not wrong. You are a witch. I stared at Kier. Are you a witch too? Or a warlock? Whatever male witches are called? Male witches are called witches, but no, I'm not one. My magic doesn't involve any spell work. I'm a druid. And then some, Linda said. You're more than that, Kier Quinn. I am what I am, he said cryptically, but that is not for you to say. I'd seen enough movies and read enough books to know what druids were, at least in theory. But other than building Stonehenge and someone eating a fish of knowledge, I was pretty clueless to what a druid actually did. What kind of magic do you have? I'm a prognosticator. I knew what the word meant. A prognosticator was someone who foretells the future. So you're a seer? Is that why you knew my sister would be all right? Not exactly. I can't see everyone's future. Druids are committed to finding witches and guiding them. I bet that came in handy during the Salem witch trials. The corner of his lip curled up in a half smile. I wasn't alive during that time. I glanced at Linda. She waved her hands. I'm only 200. That crap happened long before me. Kier knelt down beside me, his lithe frame graceful and his movement effortless. His expression softened as he reached out as if he might touch my cheek. He stopped just inches short and let his hand drop. Even if I had been alive, Iris Everly, I would have never used my gift to harm your kind. He'd taken the crystal and it had turned to milky white. Is that because you're bright? Kier chuckled. I like to think I'm fairly bright. You know what I mean. I elbowed his thigh. He wobbled, grinning as he righted himself. Yes, I do know what you mean. My field of magic follows the bright path. When Kier Quinn smiled, it was as if the whole world lit up with energy. Maybe that's what it meant to be on the bright path. The gray in his eyes began to sparkle as if someone had strung my garden fairy lights behind his irises. How are you doing that? He held out his hand to me. There's so much you need to learn, Iris. So much I want to teach you. I melted at his words. His wide, firm lips were so close. How easy it would be to accidentally fall onto them with my own lips. You have such a nice face, I said. Kier caressed my cheek. I like your face, too. A dirt clod smacked me in the temple. I whipped my glare at Linda. None of that, she said. Where in the world had she found a handful of dirt in the house? Did she carry the stuff in her pockets? Linda snapped and pointed out the front door. Crap. The front door was still open, and I saw Michael exiting the passenger side of his father's car. Not today, I croaked as I got up from the floor. I had to pull myself together. My son is here. Mom? Michael's pace quickened. Did you fall? He was at my elbow, helping me to my feet. I tripped, but I'm good. I dusted the knees of my yoga pants. I thought you were riding with Doug. Dad wants to talk to you. Michael gave Kier a funny look. Who's this? Kier answered. I'm a friend of your Aunt Marigold. I work at the college with her. I just hired your mom to do some freelance editing for me. Michael, who I'm sure stopped listening after Aunt Marigold, grunted. Cool. He loped past us, then stopped. Why is the garden gnome on the living room floor? Chapter 10. In the 20-something years that I'd known Evan Callahan, there was one thing that never changed. The man was still as handsome as ever. Even worse, I think he'd gotten better looking with age. His curly blonde hair and deep dimples were like salt in the wound. I still had so many questions for Kier, but I couldn't blow off my axe, not in front of Michael. I'd worked tirelessly this past year to make this divorce as amicable as possible. Evan hadn't fought for custody, and he'd given up his half of the house. Because of that, I hadn't asked for alimony, only child support. My editing job paid the bills. Since my home was paid for, the only expenses I had were utilities, groceries, and whatever Michael needed. As Evan sauntered up the sidewalk and toward the front door, I turned to Kier. Can we talk later? Kier's fingertips casually brushed the back of my hand. I have a house north of town. I'll text you the address. As he left, I could still feel the lingering sensation of his skin on mine. When he passed Evan, they gave each other the sup nod. I rolled my eyes. Men. Come on, Linda. I picked up the gnome and carried her into the kitchen with Evan on my heels. Hey, Iris, he said. He rarely made eye contact with me anymore. I guess I couldn't blame him. If I'd cheated on him and got caught, I would have moved to a vacant island in some far-off land so that I would never have to show my dishonest, vow-breaking face to anyone ever again. Of course, that was just me. I set Linda down on the counter, but turned her toward the wall as my little F.U. to the sarcastic gnome. I signed the papers 2 days ago, Evan. All done. Dawn filed them at the courthouse, so we are officially no longer married. Great. He shuffled his loafered feet alongside the stone tile. I wanted to talk to you before I told Michael. I narrowed my gaze. Told Michael what? Adam and I are... He was so hesitant, I thought it could only be one thing. Getting married? Evan's blue eyes got big, a mixture of shock and surprise. No. I mean, we've bandied it about, but no. Then what? Just spit it out, Evan. We're thinking about moving. Okay. I knew he was renting an apartment right now. Are you buying a house? Mr. Federer's place, 1 block over from my house, had a for sale sign on the lawn. For all that was sacred, I pleaded with the universe that he wasn't trying to move him and his boyfriend into the neighborhood. Yes. I mean, we'd like to buy a house. Evan wiggled his nose, something he did when he was nervous. Something I used to think was cute. In St. Louis. St. Louis? You are really trying to erase your past, huh? I can see why you don't want to talk to Michael about this. He tried to put a consoling hand on my arm, but I moved out of his reach. I'm sorry, Iris. I hate that I keep hurting you. That I keep hurting our son. Adam's been offered a coaching job at a private school there. I've put out feelers for a teaching position at several universities. Wouldn't your life be easier if I left town? Wouldn't Michael's? Hadn't I just been wishing he'd had gone off to a deserted island? Still, it hurt thinking about what this news would do to Michael. You can't just leave our son like this, He's going into his senior year. Soon he'll be off to college. Adam wants to take the job, doesn't he? It's almost twice as much money as he makes now, and the athletic program is competitive. Tears welled in my eyes, and I hated myself for crying. But the tears weren't for me. If Evan moved, I worried what it would do to Michael. It would be like losing his dad all over again. He put his arms around me. I'm sorry, Iris. I'm so sorry. I knew he wasn't talking about moving. He'd apologized 1,000,000 times since the night I found out about him and Adam. This was 1,000,001. I clenched my fist as anger welled inside me as I wished for thicker skin. Something so impenetrable nothing could get past it to hurt me. I had never thought of myself as weak, but losing Evan had turned me into a woman I couldn't stand. A woman I didn't want to live with anymore. I would be strong. A pillar for my son, and for him, I would weather every storm. Let me go, Evan. My voice was cold even to my own ears. I don't care what you do anymore. Stay, move, get married. What you do is no longer my business. You no longer have any kind of hold on me. A burst of power jolted from my core and out my chest. Evan tore away from me, his head smacking the refrigerator. The violence of it snapped me out of my rage. Oh my God, Evan, are you okay? Christ, Iris, you could have given me a concussion. He rubbed the back of his head. Have you been doing CrossFit with Rose? I didn't. I rubbed my arms to dissipate the residual energy rippling across my skin. I didn't mean to. I guess I'm not as evolved as I thought. I chuckled so I wouldn't cry anymore. What's that on your hand? He asked. I looked where he had pointed. There was a gray patch about the size of a quarter just below my wrist on my left hand. I touched it. It felt like bark. What the hell? I'd wished for tougher skin. Had I done this to myself? This and a dozen more questions were for Linda and not for my ex. You should go, Evan. You've said what you came to say. When you and Adam decide what you're going to do, we can sit down with Michael. But your hand is also not your problem. I leaned on the counter and tucked my bark-skinned hand behind my back. Evan sneezed. He glanced around the kitchen. He sneezed violently this time, and his eyes started watering. Bob jumped up on the counter next to Linda and growled. It made me smile. Crazy imp. He definitely knew how to read a mood. When did you get a cat? He sneezed a couple more times. I've got to go before my eyes swell shut. Good idea. You should get some Benadryl. I ran my hand down Bob's back as Evan fled the kitchen. When he was out of the house, Linda said, Don't let the door hit ya, where the good Lord Vida split ya. She sat down on the counter, swinging her legs off the edge. I never did like him. I sighed wistfully. I did. I put my barky hand in front of Linda. What is this, and how do I get rid of it? It looks like ironbark. She grabbed my hand and turned it over. There was another spot on my forearm. This isn't good. It reminded me of my dad's eczema. Do you think a steroid cream might help? This isn't something that any modern medicine can fix, Liebling. You've cast a spell, and now you have to uncast it. I did not. Only I knew I had. I'd wished to be strong enough to break Evan's hold, and my powers had literally thrown him away from me. But I hadn't asked for skin covered in bark. Could this be a side effect of magic? All magic has a cost, but it's usually little things, like a single hair falling out or a nail breaking. I've never seen it do this. How do I reverse a spell? Your terrorcraft is too unpredictable right now. Your sister wasn't wrong. There are fault lines in this mountain. I'm not saying you'll tear the mountain down, but... She spread her hands out. The only way you can fix this is by doing the work to master Earth's magic. Once it starts, you can't stop it. I recalled the inscription. Once it's begun, it cannot be undone. I didn't understand it then, but I did now. Any good news? I asked hopefully. She held up a finger and waved it at me. There's only bad news. I hate you, Linda. I know, Kleinkind. She stroked her beard. Unfortunately, your magic is more powerful and unpredictable than I expected. I fear if you don't learn to control it soon, you will not survive the transition. The truth is, not all witches survive going from the spark to full transition. There are only two choices. Embrace the true craft, or die trying. My throat felt thick as I swallowed back my fear. How much time do I have? She gave me a solemn look. You picked a terrible time to spark. There's a lunar eclipse on the 26th of this month. The combination of the supermoon and the eclipse will magnify all magic. Your power is already strong, and your lack of control will cause you to... She produced a pea-sized pebble in her hand, pulverized it between her fingertips, then blew the dust in my face. Got it. Dust in the wind. I'd gotten a notice on my weather app about the lunar eclipse. It was a rare supermoon event, and when I'd read about it, it had sounded pretty cool. Now, it sounded terrifying. That's in 4 days. I've known magic is real for like a minute, and now I have to pull off mastering this Terracraft stuff in 4 friggin' days? How many times have you told me I'm a slow learner? I'm not going to make it. You'll make it, Leibling, Linda said. I swear it. She leaped to the floor. Just no spell work for now. We'll stick to the basics of understanding how nature works. If you knew doing a spell was dangerous, why did you let me do it? Because, as I said before, failure is often our greatest teacher. You knew I'd fail then? Not so spectacularly, but yes. Linda cast a look over her shoulder at me as she walked through the wall. But I hoped you wouldn't. My hero, Bob the Imp Cat, stood up and rubbed his body on my arm. I found it oddly calming. Then he circled the counter and twitched his tail at me. My eyes widened. Linda was right. Bob didn't have a butthole, which meant I wouldn't have to buy kitty litter or cat food. You might just be perfect. Bob meeped, a cute little sound of contentment, then yarked a hairball up next to my sink. Chapter 11. I'd used bandages from the first aid kit to cover the 2 bark-like areas on my wrist and arm. Michael came into the kitchen a few minutes later. He had been going to his friend Doug's house every afternoon this week, so Linda's lessons in supernatural horrors would have to wait until he was gone. Michael had showered and changed into shorts and a tank top. This was not his usual hang wear. Are you in for the day? Yep. It's Friday. You don't have a hot date or something? I'm playing the new Battle Call of the Wild 7 with Doug and Jake. Michael opened the fridge and freezer at the same time and scoured the shelves. Are we out of orange juice? Yeah, sorry. I'll go to the grocery store this afternoon. Do you want me to get some snacks for you and the guys? I hadn't been food shopping this week, and Doug alone could pound down some grub. His words, not mine. For me, he said. I'll take some tortilla chips, a couple cans of nacho cheese, and some stuff to make salsa. And the guys? The bark on my wrist and forearm itched under the bandages. They're playing from home. He was still standing in the open doors. He knew what drove me nuts, but I tried hard not to take the bait. I didn't have the energy to fight with him. I'll admit, the news that I wasn't going to have 2 more teenagers running around the house today relieved me. Don't get me wrong. I loved Michael's friends. They'd been as much a part of getting him through the last year with his sanity intact as I had. However, if they were playing together online, it meant that Michael's recent shower was probably going to be his last for the entire weekend. Those boys could get dug in when it came to a new battle call game. It also meant that I couldn't attend Linda's workshop on how not to destroy my life with Terracraft. Since I only had a few days to Dust Day, I would have to figure out how to interact with the gnome from hell when Michael was home. Michael pulled a nearly empty milk jug out, then put it back as he casually asked, "What did Dad want?" Ah, the real reason he was letting all the cold out of the fridge and freezer. Damn it. Why had Evan talked to me about his moving plans before he'd spoken to Michael? This wasn't a secret I wanted to keep from my kid, but I also didn't want to ruin his weekend by dropping the bomb on him that his father might or might not be moving to another state. You know your dad. It's always something. Why did I feel like I was constantly navigating Evan and Michael's relationship? Oh, because I was. Frankly, I didn't want to be in the middle of their stuff. Not anymore. As of 2 days ago, I wasn't married to Evan. I didn't have to keep acting like his wife, damn it. I was always the bad news giver. Evan didn't like conflict, which is why it took our son finding him in a compromising position before he admitted he'd fallen in love with someone else. If Evan didn't learn to communicate directly with our son, I was going to kill him. The bark skin burned, reminding me that even my thoughts could be dangerous. I would never wish Evan dead, so I mentally readjusted kill him with kick his ass. I walked to Michael and flicked the back of his head. "Close the refrigerator, kid." He tried to smack my hand, but I jumped away. Ha! Too slow. I danced back and forth on the balls of my feet and mimicked a right-left-right punch combo. I float like a butterfly and sting like lemon juice in the eye. So lame, Michael said with a chuckle. His laugh made me smile. I'm going out this afternoon. I'll pick up some juice and nacho fixins on the way home. Do you want anything else? We need milk. And you can get me some chocolate syrup if you want. I pinched the peach fuzz on his jawline. You got it. Did we get a cat? Bob! I picked up the imp and smushed his whiskery face. He tilted his nose and bumped it on mine. The tension melted from my muscles and my mood lightened. This is Bob. And he was better than a Xanax. Michael smiled and scratched the furry mood stabilizer between his short ears. Hey, Bob. Bob's purring kicked up a notch. Oh, look, he loves you already, Michael. I met my son's gaze. You're pretty easy to love, though. Michael rolled his eyes. He's kind of dopey looking, but he's cool. If Bob was offended by the dopey comment, he didn't show it. Cool, I said. I gave him a quick hug. Have fun today with your friends. I'll let you know when I get back with the food. Thanks, Mom. You got it, babe. Now I had to break it to a cranky gnome that I was skipping class. Although, maybe I didn't need to skip it altogether. I went into the living room and rummaged in my purse until I found Kier Quinn's card. I had to talk to him sooner than later. With Michael being home for the rest of the day, sooner was the better option. I went to the garden first. Linda was back in her place by my bench, giving it the old stony stare. I giggled. I couldn't believe I'd been blaming Michael this whole time for moving Linda, and she'd been doing it herself. I sat down in my favorite spot. Well, Mr. Miyagi, there will be no waxing on or waxing off today. The kid is home, and I don't want to have to explain any of this. I held up my bandaged arm. To him. So I'm headed to Kier Quinn's to get some answers. He seems to know a lot about me, about my ancestors. I sneered at the idea of my bio family. It would be a lie to say I never thought about who they were, especially after I had Michael. Mainly because every time the pediatrician asked for family medical history, I had to leave it blank. Cripes. Will Michael become a witch? He already is, Linda said. It's another reason you have to master your powers. Her revelation exploded my brain. Why didn't you tell me this before? Before when? Before you knew what you were? You know, when you thought you were on drugs? The gnome was right. I was just now coming to terms with the fact that magic was real. If she had told me Michael was a witch yesterday, I would have laughed in her face. Don't get logical on me, Linda. Her stony expression softened. I don't say these things to make your life harder, Liebling. I say them because they are true. And the truth, as you well know, is the greatest gift. I don't know. $1 million would be pretty awesome. What is money? Just paper to burn. Spoken like someone who doesn't have to pay bills. Linda smirked. That's also true. She walked over to me and placed her hand on my knee. Take the grimoire, she said. He can help you unlock its secrets. But it's empty. You better look, Clankeet. She shook her head. The only thing empty is your imagination. Just when I was starting to like you. The itching on my arm worsened. I lifted the bandage and my stomach sank. The margins had gotten wider on the spot on my wrist. It's getting worse. I checked my forearm. The dime-sized area was closer to a nickel now in size. It's expanding. This is not good. Can you just... I rubbed my fingers together on one hand. Poof it like you did the rock earlier? She'd turned it to dust without using any energy or having to say the words. How did you do that, by the way? It was so effortless. I don't possess true craft. Only witches and die Hexenmeister can manipulate the elements with spellwork. I'm an earth spirit. Rocks, dirt, metals, and basically anything mineral-based are at my command. At least on a small scale. The way you walk through the air, the way the molecules move around you and out of your way so you can move unencumbered. That is the way with my kind. She disappeared into the grass and popped up almost instantly a few feet on the other side of the bench. The ground was undisturbed. I know everything there is to know about Terra, which is why I'm suited to instruct you in Terra craft. And the druid? His story is for him to tell. You don't trust him. It's not him, Clankeet. She snorted, and a pebble shot out of her nose. I don't trust you. I see the way you looked at him. You just got rid of one distraction, and I'm not sure you can afford another. Your focus has to be the craft, and the craft is driven by emotion. If your launa, your mood, is all over the place, your magic will be all over the place. You don't have to worry about me. I'm on a man break. Remember, Linda held up a finger, and surprisingly not the middle one this time. Your magic knows your heart. All the pretty words won't save you if the intention isn't there. Michael opened the back door, and Linda froze in place. Hey, can you pick me up some shot cola? That's terrible for you. It'll give you a... I was going to say heart attack, but gah, words, intention, blah, blah. Pick a different drink. His expression fell. I'll just drink some iced coffee. Terrific, I told him. You going soon? He rubbed his belly. I'm getting hungry for nachos. There's ham in the fridge. Eat a sandwich. It'll hold you over until I get back. He closed the door, and Linda animated. Go, she said. I will keep the boy safe. Is he in danger? Linda shrugged. Your earlier explosion of energy might have attracted the wrong kind of creatures. Great. Now I had to worry about Michael's safety on top of not turning into magical dust. Like who? And do I have to worry about Michael turning into dust too? To a lesser degree. Other earth spirits like fairies, elves, and trolls. A troll showing up would be the worst of these three. Your terror craft was powerful. Wild, yes, but some of the strongest I have ever felt. It's bound to attract some riffraff. She adjusted her hat down over her ears. As to Michael, he may never spark, but even if he does, we have years to teach him about the true craft before he might come into his magic. We? Did this mean Linda was sticking around? I hadn't liked the gnome when she didn't talk. I liked her less now that she did. What about other gnomes? She twisted her beard. We don't fight amongst ourselves, but the earth spirits are the least of my concern. She took a dramatic pause. Spit it out, Linda. I've already mentioned them a couple of times, but the Hexenmeister will be your most dangerous foes. Crap, I still hadn't looked up Hexenmeister. Do they hex people? Linda circled a finger at me. Very close. The Hexenmeister are kin to witches, and they can use the craft. However, unlike witches, a Hexenmeister isn't born with magic. They have to acquire it through sacrifice, and I'm not talking metaphorically. They sacrifice witches to siphon the magic. What do you think all the witch trials through the ages were about? Most of them were engineered by the Hexenmeister to gain magic without raising a fuss. Nowadays, they have to be more subtle about it. She raised her gaze to me. And who better to acquire magic from than an untrained, powerful witch on the verge of burning herself out? I blinked. When you put it that way, I wanted to grab Michael, find the deepest, most secure vault I could find, and lock him in it. Maybe I should stay home. Even if any of these elementals showed up, it wouldn't be tonight. I would feel their arrival, and so far, other than my brethren who are scattered throughout South Hill Village, no other Earth spirits have arrived. And the Hexenmeister? They're a little trickier. There is no way to detect one unless they use their borrowed power. But trust me, I can protect Michael if need be. You are less than 2 feet tall and have hands the size of my big toes. Linda gave me a baleful glare. Go to the druid. Talk to him. Then bring back food for your boy. Until then, take solace in the fact that I am watching over Michael. And Bob? She rolled her eyes so hard that all I saw were the whites. Ew. I will watch over the imp as well. Thanks, Linda. You're not so bad. She put fisted hands on her hips, Superman style. And you are a dolt. I take it back. You're awful. Linda narrowed her gaze at me. Why are you still here? I'm going. Sheesh. As I walked away, I felt a sharp sting of a rock bouncing off my right butt cheek. When I whipped around to confront Linda, she was back in her flower bed, still as stone and staring at my bench. When I turned to walk away, I zigged sideways as another pebble zipped past me and bounced harmlessly off the side of my house. Ha! Missed me, bitch. My celebration ended when a large piece of sod smacked me in the back of my head. Do better, I heard Linda say as I scooted inside the house. Learn faster. I grabbed Kier's card to call him, but when I got to my phone, I saw I had a missed text. 22459 Bard's Lane. Take the second gravel road. See you soon, KQ. Damn, he'd beaten me to the punch. Was it a coincidence? Or had he seen me coming with his gifts? Either way, it was time to go. I texted him back. On my way. The 3 dots that cycle on the screen when someone is writing a text kept starting and stopping. Finally, Kier wrote back, I know. Brazen bastard. Chapter 12. Bard Lane was near the top of the mountain. By the time I arrived, I was seriously regretting the 44-ounce soda I'd guzzled in the half-hour trip. The gravel roads agitated my full bladder like Pop Rocks in a bottle of Mountain Dew. In other words, I was about to explode. Finally, I pulled up and parked next to Kier Quinn's pale green Mini Cooper EV. The property had a lot of tall white oak trees, a few red maples, and a variety of pines. But the vista of all views was a stunning waterfall that emptied into a stream behind Kier's tiny house. I'd seen tiny homes on television, but I'd never seen one up close. Kier's looked like a tall shipping container with rustic wood siding and huge windows on the front and the back. I grabbed the grimoire from the passenger seat and hurried to the front door. I could easily see the waterfall from the door's window to the window in the back wall. I saw a couch, a sink, and full bookshelves under a steep staircase to a loft bed. The two things I couldn't see was Keir or a bathroom. I danced around as my full bladder reminded me of my extra-large soda mistake. I knocked on the wood trim. "Hello?" Where was he? He knew I was coming. The door opened, and I stumbled back in surprise. I may or may not have peed myself a little. "Son of a bitch!" Keir smiled. "Hello to you, too." "Where the heck did you come from?" "Inside," he answered. I wanted to argue because he had not appeared in front of the window before the door opened. But I had other dragons to slay. I crossed my legs and prayed to the bladder gods to give me urethral strength. "Do you have indoor plumbing or an outhouse?" "I have a compost toilet under the loft." "Oh, dear Lord. Well, beggars can't be choosers." I pushed the book into his hands, then wiggled past him, thankful I only had to go about 4 feet to a curtain under a wooden platform that I presumed was for his bed. "Get out!" I yelled at Keir as I closed the curtain and yanked down my pants. "Get out now!" The front door shut hard enough for me to hear it, and I let the flood go. And go. And go. My relief and my embarrassment were tied for top emotions. Linda had been worried for absolutely no reason. I had pretty much guaranteed that even if Keir Quinn had ever seen me as a sexual prospect, it was over now. I exited the toilet space and used what I assumed was the kitchen/bathroom sink to wash my hands. There was a foot pump to run the water, and there was a bottle of No Suds environmentally friendly soap mounted on the wall. It took me a second, but I figured it out, then dried my hands. I drew back the curtains and let out a breath I'd been holding that Keir had actually gone outside. He was standing in his backyard, appreciating the view. Now that I was less focused on my bodily functions, I let myself admire the view as well. The man wore a pair of jeans that fit snug on his well-formed ass, and even though his shoulders were narrow, I could see the definition of his muscles under the faded blue t-shirt he had on. He looked over his shoulder, his eyes meeting mine through the glass, and grinned. "Can I come back in, or do you want another minute to take in the scenery?" My cheeks warmed. "You can come back in." It took all of 10 seconds for Keir to walk from the back of the house to the front. "That's quite the workout," I said as he entered. He arched a brow. "I hope you found the bathroom okay." "It's easy to get lost in this mansion of yours, but I managed." I gestured to his couch, where he'd also left the grimoire. "Can I sit?" "Sure," he said. "That's the living room and the guest bedroom. The sofa folds down into a daybed. Very efficient use of space." I sat down, and while I wouldn't call the cushions plush, they weren't uncomfortable. I glanced around the room. "Can I ask a question?" "I like it up here. The mighty oaks can speak to me without the interference of electrical power lines and cell phone towers. Besides, I like living off the grid." "How do you charge your car?" "Solar panels in a clearing about 200 yards up the road, and I charge my phone with the car." "Where do you shower and stuff?" There hadn't been a shower in the curtained watershed bathroom. "I built a solar shower near the falls. It collects rainwater, the sun heats it, and voila. If it doesn't rain, I just gather it from the creek there." "So you have to walk out to the falls every day to shower?" I'll admit, the idea of Keir walking through the grass buck naked was not unappealing. I couldn't live this way. "When I am here, I am most myself, Iris. This place, for me, is like a spiritual awakening every time I step out of my vehicle." "It's your church, huh?" He chuckled. "Something like that." "You said you came here for me, and you can see the future. My future, right?" "Since you were born." "Dude, I'm 43. You look younger than me." "I'm 43 too," he said. "I was born on May 1st. "Hey, that's my birthday." Or at least the one I'd been assigned. And I'd been abandoned when I was a few weeks old, so I had no birth certificate and no name. I'd been baby girl doe until Grace and Randall Everly took me in. They'd given me my birth date as well. Yes. Kier took a book from the cramped shelves. I was born 2 hours before you. But May 1st isn't even my real birthday. He chuckled. It is. I don't remember a lot from that day. I was a newborn myself, but your birth has been with me since the moment you arrived. Wow. Maybe my folks had been clairvoyant as well. Or your family's magic guided them. I thought about Linda. Mom had insisted she go in my garden, and she made sure that Linda was sentimental enough to her that I would never get rid of the stony grump. Had the McGee coven, part of the clan who had named the peninsula in Ireland, had a hand in that as well? Kier handed me the book. It was a textbook on Arthurian legends. Did you know that Merlin the magician was a prognosticator? He could see Arthur even before he met him. What you won't read about in other books, he tapped the cover, is that Merlin had been born 2 hours before Arthur, and he was born with the birthmark of a crown on his wrist. It was the symbol for Arthur Pendragon, the man whom Merlin would spend the rest of his life with. He smiled at me. It was one of the greatest tales of love ever written. They were lovers? Kier shrugged. Only Merlin and Arthur know. But I'm not talking about physical love. I'm talking about a bond that goes beyond that. It's a bond of friendship, companionship, and devotion. It's a bond that makes a person willing to give up their entire life to save the other. I do know what that's like. His expression held the question. My son, I told him. I knew the minute Michael was born, I'd die for him. Even more, I'd kill for him. The answer made Kier smile. Yes, that's the bond I mean. It's the same for you and me. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. Look, you seem like a nice guy and all, but I'm not sure I'd be willing to give up my life for you. I barely know you. He laughed. You don't understand. This kind of devotion is always one-sided for my ilk. I have been waiting for you to awaken since your birth. When it sparked last year, I came to find you. How did I spark? I don't understand. I haven't had any magical weirdness happen to me until I found the book. The spark happens for witches for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's a happy event, sometimes it's a trauma. For some, there is no rhyme or reason. But it just means there is the potential, and that potential will try to find a way into this world. I'd had a lot of bad stuff happen over the year. Maybe the divorce had been the reason. I hoped not. I didn't need one more reason to hate Evan. So I sparked, and you put me in the path of those books. He raised his hand. That was fate's doing, not mine. I think fate got a nudge. I tapped the book beside me. You can see my future, right? He nodded. Yes. Then tell me what happens next. Do I master this earth crap in a few days, or do I poof, I mimicked explosions with my hands, and turn into magic dust? He took my hands. His fingers were warm, and my skin felt electrified under his touch. I don't see one future, Iris. I see thousands of futures. All mine? Every single one of them. Every possible choice you can make is constantly changing every outcome in any given situation. I can see the inevitability of certain situations playing out to a natural conclusion. Still, those conclusions are not written in stone. Some things are easier to predict because they are habitual, like whether someone will brush their teeth in the morning. You have a lovely smile. Chances are good that brushing is part of your daily routine. That's guessing, not foretelling. It's not guessing. I've seen every outcome. So why can't you just tell me what to do to get myself to the best conclusion? Because telling you would change the final result. I can guide you, but ultimately you are the one who has to make the decisions. I'm so confused. Here is something that you can bank on. I am here for you, Iris. I will guide you when you ask for it. I will celebrate with you when you are happy. I will hold you when you're sad, and I'll stay with you when you're scared. Your enemies are my enemies. Your family and friends are my family and friends. And when it comes time to fight, I will be at your side until the end. I'm not looking for a boyfriend or a husband. I can't do until death do we part with another person. He let go of my hands and paced the small space from the sink to the sofa. I'm not trying to be your boyfriend or your husband. Then what are you trying to be? Whatever you need. It's not just my job. It's my life's purpose. You are the reason I exist. His sincerity ramped up my anxiety and my chest squeezed. What Kier offered was such a lopsided deal that it made my heart hurt for him. Blind devotion didn't leave a lot of room for free will. I need my grass cut, my gutters cleaned, and my leaky faucet fixed. This, I pointed between us, I don't need. I'm not trying to frighten you, Iris. You need my help to understand your abilities before the supermoon lunar eclipse. Give me these next couple of days to save your life. I'm not Arthur Pendragon. I'm a nobody from Southall Village. Only, I wasn't a nobody, was I? I was a witch. A witch with unpredictable powers. I held up my wrist to Kier and stripped the bandage. This happened today when Evan was at the house. The bark-like adhesion was the size of a quarter now. Kier ran his finger lightly over the rough surface. He turned my arm and took the bandage from my forearm, then examined that one as well. It was a protection spell, he finally said. You wanted thicker skin so you wouldn't hurt. How do you know that? His smile was sad. It's one of 1,000 scenarios I've seen for you. I don't always remember them all, and there are aspects of your future that I just can't see. But what I have seen, I see with more precision once you've made a decision. That's both confusing and horrific. How can you function with all that going on in your head? Do you have conversations in your head where you play out scenarios? Yes, quite a lot actually. And you hear song lyrics? You think about a childhood memory, you worry about your son, or any manner of things like stuff on your to-do list. Speaking of to-do lists, I still have to get groceries today. Kier's hand slipped into mine. I should have pulled away, but it just felt so damn good when he touched me. So your brain is constantly going. Sometimes it's on so much I can hardly sleep. So much noise. His eyes softened as his lips curled up into a smile. How do you manage to do your job? Keep your house, raise your son, and any number of the other things you take care of daily with all that noise in your head. I'm used to it. I nodded, finally getting it. Damn, Linda was right. I could be a little slow. You're used to it. It's just the noise in your brain. Kier raised his brows. Exactly. So, I said, you want me to give you 4 days of trust until I get through this terrifying do-or-die magic test? Yep. He gave me a crooked grin. That's what I want. And after that? My question made him laugh. Let's take it one crisis at a time. I couldn't help but smile. That's the story of my life, pal. He smiled back. I know. Chapter 13. Can I offer you something to drink? What do you have? I have beer and canned water. So many options, I smirked. I still have to drive a half hour back to town and shop for groceries, so I'll pass on the beer. Water, then? He asked. Did I want to risk having to pee a second time before I got home? No, I did not. Nah, I'm good. I have to go soon. I looked at the single sink run by a foot pump. How do you keep the beer and water cold? The beer is in a solar cooler, and I have a case of water in the closet. First, I should have guessed about the solar cooler, but where in the world do you have a closet in this place? It's next to the toilet. I've peeked behind the curtain, future guy. There's no closet in there. He grinned. Follow me. I stood up. Guide me, O wise one. Kier's handsome and slightly pretty face was awash with levity. Your wish is my command. I chuckled until I remembered he'd said he'd been born bonded to me. Not really, though, right? Like, you don't have to do what I say or anything like that, do you? His expression turned so serious it made